The story opens with our protagonist stepping into the scene. He once worked as a mechanical engineer, but pushing himself far beyond his limits led to a stroke that left him in a life-threatening state. Through all the hardships he faced, he remained single because no woman wanted to be with someone they saw as a broke, hopeless loser like him. As these thoughts pile up in his mind, our protagonist decides he's done fighting and chooses to simply let go. Out of nowhere, a status window materializes before his eyes. In that very moment, his senses begin to stir again. Slowly, our guy gathers himself and starts to understand what's going on around him. After taking his final breath in that hospital bed, he finds himself reborn into another world as someone named Rain Edgar. Rain, his new identity, is the third son of the Grand Duke, Eldarian Edgar, and he has both an older brother and an older sister. It doesn't take long for our guy to realize that Rain is the pampered child of the family. He's the one everyone constantly showers with affection and care. The household is always bringing him gifts or feeding him good food, all to ensure that he stays comfortable, since he's the smallest member of the family. Rain enjoys this gentle, luxurious life so much that he begins to think of it as a remedy for the misery he suffered in his previous existence. The continent of Eldria is a realm where everything functions through the use of magic. Among all the human nations here, the Caradorial Empire stands as the largest. Many other races also inhabit this world, including elves and dwarves. Rain starts to feel that his current blessings are a form of balance after his harsh past life. He's sipping tea when a maid informs him that his father has called for him. He presents himself before his father and bows respectfully. The man then asks if Rain knows the reason behind this summons. Rain replies that he doesn't. After all, he can't read minds. What follows catches Rain off guard, since he never once considered anything related to managing territory. His father rises from his seat, walks toward a massive map displayed in the room, and explains that the territory Rain will govern lies in the northwest. He then tells Rain that while their lands are secure for now, the future of their empire is far from bright. Rain agrees with his father's view. After all, the royal family of the Caradorial Empire is deteriorating due to ongoing political corruption. Rain finds himself genuinely wanting to protect those he considers family. His father notices Rain drifting into deep thought and assumes the responsibility is weighing heavily on him. He reassures Rain that there is no need to rush. But Rain jumps in, asking whether improving food security would help strengthen the region. His father gently explains that food problems cannot be solved with passion alone. They require careful, step-by-step solutions. Deep inside, the man believes Rain is still just a child who doesn't fully grasp what he's talking about. With a bright smile, Rain tells him confidently to leave the food issue entirely in his hands. Because it sits at the crossroads of three nations, Eichling City is constantly pulled into the fires of war. Endless battles have turned a once fertile land into barren soil, and the population has dwindled heavily. Rain realizes that a large labor force is essential for any industrial revolution to take root. And right now, the city lacks exactly that. This is why he must devise a way to increase the city's population. Along with that, Rain believes he possesses the ability to view a person's stats. He has already tested this ability on his family members, and through it, he has gained a rough understanding of what people in this world are like. Rain has made it his top priority to recruit talented individuals as soon as he reaches his territory. Sharing the carriage with him is his maid. Deep inside, the red-haired maid also hopes that Rain will keep things peaceful when they finally settle in the territory. Meanwhile, one of the corrupt men running the city, its current lord, asks if they should make the first move. He has heard rumors that the Duke holds deep affection for his youngest son, but the man wearing a mask tells him to hold back and wait for further instructions from their master. The noble is anxious that Rain might uncover the financial and tax fraud he's been committing. Since Rain will arrive soon, the masked man tells the city lord to leave so he can greet the newcomer properly. Not long after, Rain and his maid Lee reach the outskirts of the city. Rain quickly notices that the land is incredibly fertile, yet due to the lack of people, it has fallen into ruin. He then asks Lee to hand him the map of the surrounding area. Studying the map for several minutes, Rain realizes that constructing a canal connecting the region to the southern seaport would be an excellent undertaking. He's still deep in thought about his plans, when a small voice beside him suddenly breaks through. It's a little girl pleading with her father to stop gambling. She begs him, reminding him that the money is meant for her mother's treatment. But the man is completely consumed by his desperation, convinced that this is finally his chance to win big. That's when Rain sends the man flying with a solid punch to the face. Lee immediately rushes over to check on Rain. She scolds him gently, insisting that he must warn her beforehand next time so she can prepare his protective gear. Rain argues that it was a sudden reaction, and there was no way for Lee to prepare in time anyway. He then asks Lee to check on the girl, while he deals with the pathetic man who dared call himself her father. Rain confronts the man for gambling away money meant for life-saving treatment, putting his entire family at risk. The man nervously asks who Rain is. Rain simply replies that his identity is irrelevant. Once the man leaves, Rain decides to examine the girl's physical condition through the system. The girl bursts into tears, saying that she would have been completely helpless if the money for her mother's treatment had been stolen from her. With the system's help, Rain learns that the girl's name is Lillian, and she possesses a special talent related to farming and harvesting. He realizes she's practically a blessing when it comes to agriculture, and he needs to recruit her right away. Rain then tells Lillian she can ride in his carriage since they're heading toward town as well. Lillian panics, saying she's dirty and doesn't want to taint the carriage. Rain smiles and tells her the carriage isn't anything fancy, just wooden planks put together. He then asks Lillian why a gambling den is thriving when poverty has already sunk so deeply into the territory. After hearing her answer, Rain heads into town and realizes that conducting a census will let him determine how many productive workers the territory still has. But his first destination is the Lord's estate, so he can check how much money is available for him to use. Rain asks Lillian if she knows the location of the Lord's estate, and she is just about to answer when they hear the sound of a horseman approaching, cracking a whip, and yelling for everyone to move aside. He insults everyone in his path, calling them peasants, and he nearly tramples Rain with his horse, leaving Lee furious. Rain quickly tells Lee to let the rider go, pointing out that she's accidentally squeezing him with her large chest. Lee immediately fixes her posture and asks Rain if he's alright. Rain reassures her that he's fine and it's thanks to her. Rain then asks Lillian if she knows who the rude horseman is. Lillian explains that every casino in the city belongs to the man's family. Rain grins upon hearing that, because owning all the casinos means they're stacked with money. Instead of heading to the estate, Rain tells Lillian to take him to the casino instead. Lillian tries to stop him, warning that the casino will strip him of all his money, leaving her confused about just how powerful Rain truly is. They finally arrive at the Grand Casino, and Rain can't wait to drain it dry in exchange for building his production line. The first thing he sees is a desperate man begging for 10 gold coins, making empty promises that he can pay them back. Nearby, another man is shouting that he just won. Rain is disgusted by all of it, because he knows that as long as casinos exist, no one will ever work properly. Lillian then asks if Rain is ready to act, since the soldiers have already surrounded the casino. But Rain tells her to wait, because he's holding out for the biggest target to appear. Rain walks over to one of the attendants, who asks what game he wants to play. Rain admits he has no idea, so he tells the attendant to guide him to something simple. They suggest that Rain try his luck with the chips. Rain tosses the chips and the attendants cheer him on, but their cheerful behavior hides far darker intentions. The game he is playing is called Sick Bo, a well-known East Asian casino game. Depending on the total of the dice roll, the result counts as either small or big, with both having equal chances. The attendant then tells Rain that he did his best but he lost. Rain tells the man flatly that he isn't impressed in the slightest, and he decides he's leaving because he's hungry. But the attendant quickly stops him, saying Rain can't leave yet, because he has to pay the money he supposedly owes first. Rain looks utterly disgusted and asks the man when exactly he ever owed him anything. The attendant claims he lent Rain the 2 chips he used, so Rain must pay for them, yet Rain reminds him clearly that he was told the chips were on the house. The attendant immediately protests, insisting that nothing is free in a casino. Lillian suddenly jumps in, telling the attendant to shut up because he's a shameless liar. She turns to Rain and tells him not to believe that lying piece of trash, since each token is worth just a single silver coin. Hearing this ruins the attendant's scheme, and he explodes with anger, shouting at someone to beat Lillian up, but before he even finishes speaking, Rain sends him flying with a punch. Rain stays composed, asking the man who gave him permission to raise his voice. Then Rain turns and notices that the other gamblers are still entirely absorbed in their games, clinging to the hope of winning. Even so, what Rain just did definitely doesn't go unnoticed, because the big fish he's been waiting for finally appears, demanding to know who dared to cause trouble inside his casino. He then orders his guards to beat up the gamblers who made a disturbance. His men instantly obey, and he tells the remaining gamblers watching him that this is exactly what will happen to them if they don't behave. Deep down, Lillian blames herself, thinking none of this would have happened if she hadn't brought Rain and Lee to the casino. She insists she won't let them scam Rain. The other gamblers are stunned, convinced this is the end for Lillian, because no one who angers the casino owner, Versalo Mad, ever escapes unharmed. Versalo turns toward Lillian and asks if she's talking to him, and Lillian keeps going, claiming Versalo's casino has destroyed countless lives. She also says she refuses to stand by and let them bully her newly found big brother simply because he's a good person. Versilo storms toward her in rage, but Rain grabs Versilo's hand before he can reach Lillian. Rain checks his stats and discovers their horrible Versilo's loyalty is only 5, and his traits are bloodlust and brutality. Versilo shifts his focus to Rain, asking if Rain isn't satisfied with how he runs things. Rain replies that on the contrary, he's impressed because only the strong survive in this world. Then Rain tells him that whoever wins the coming fight will get the final laugh. Versilo bursts into laughter, unable to believe Rain is seriously challenging him. Rain, with an unpleasant expression, tells Versilo that he doesn't need to know who he is, he only needs to know one thing. And with a clap of his hands, Rain stands tall as his soldiers form a line behind him. He declares that since he's currently the one winning the fight, he gets the last laugh. Meanwhile, the city officials are all waiting for Rain. Many of them are already trying to figure out how to get on his good side. Even Versilo's father is planning to build a good relationship with Rain. Moments later, Rain arrives in the hall. He smiles calmly and suggests they start the meeting since everyone is already present. Rain then explains that the drawing they're looking at is the blueprint for a dam, and they must ensure the entire project succeeds. This confuses the officials even more, because none of them know what a dam even is. One of them even thinks it's something used for catching fish. Rain tells them he studied the city's geography, and that every year massive floods hit because of the northern river. He explains that building a dam there will stop flooding during rainy seasons and provide water for crops during droughts. The officials are stunned by the idea. It's brilliant, and it would drastically boost the city's productivity. They slowly begin to realize that Rain is far from an ordinary young man. One of the officials then asks Rain what exactly he wants from them. Standing behind Versilo's father, Adrian, who believes Rain is just a naive youth because he's certain the officials will refuse to give Rain any money. Rain tells them they don't need to pretend they're poor, because he raided a casino earlier that day and walked away with about 50,000 gold coins. He adds that it was only one casino, there are still several more. Adrian becomes furious at this, despite having no intention of opposing Rain before. But now that Rain has touched his business, Adrian is determined to crush him. The other officials agree with Adrian and start speaking against Rain, saying he has no right to raid legal businesses just because he feels like it. They insist the casinos are legitimate enterprises, and Rain can't simply attack them without cause. Rain responds, reminding them that they were the ones claiming to be poor when he asked for funds. Rain then informs the officials that he already knows about their involvement with the casinos, and he warns them that this is their final chance. He tells them they can voluntarily abandon the casino themselves, or he will personally make sure it's taken away from them. Adrian talks back to Rain, insisting that the Grand Duke will not be pleased once he learns what Rain is attempting. The other officials echo Adrian's words, trying to remind Rain that he should remember his place. After all, the group prides itself on following laws and similar formalities. Rain then commands the soldiers to detain every one of them, stating that he is finally ready to give them a proper lesson about the law. Rain also orders the soldiers to bring out the 2 guards from the casino. The pair is already tied up and heavily restrained. This shocks Adrian because those 2 men are always stationed right beside Versilo. The sight alone tells him that something has gone terribly wrong. Rain then asks Adrian whether he recognizes the 2 guards. Adrian claims he has no idea who they are, and he questions Rain about why he is even asking. Rain tells Adrian not to worry, explaining that he simply wants to ask about them since those same 2 tried to assassinate him earlier that afternoon. Rain adds that the 2 confessed they were backed by someone influential within the city. Rain then orders the soldiers to release the 2 men, saying he wants to see if anyone present recognizes them. The officials begin panicking because those 2 guards are known followers of Versilo, and realizing they attempted to assassinate Rain is terrifying. Adrian knows this as well, and he quickly pulls out a knife. He rushes toward the 2, pretending that he's striking them down because they supposedly attacked the Duke's son. Before anyone can react, he kills both of them in a brutal, bloody manner. Afterward, he turns to Rain and claims he acted rashly because his anger overwhelmed him. He tells Rain he's ready to accept any punishment for his actions. Yet Rain tells him he finds it impressive Adrian apparently has a powerful sense of justice. Adrian keeps his composure, saying he only did what needed to be done. Rain then shifts the situation, telling his soldiers to bring in the true culprit so they can find out if there are any more impressive nobles like Adrian in the room. At that moment, Versilo is dragged inside. He's screaming non-stop about how his father is the most powerful noble in the entire town. Adrian's eyes go wide with shock when he sees his son captured, only now understanding why he couldn't locate him. Versilo then tells Rain he's a dead man, and that once he gets out, he will personally make sure Rain is tortured. The declaration plays right into Rain's plan, and he points out that Versilo has openly threatened torture and murder. Versilo doubles down, declaring that he's untouchable in the city and that Rain is as good as dead. Rain laughs at this, saying Versilo might just be the boldest fool he's ever encountered. Rain steps aside so Versilo can see who is standing behind him. Versilo laughs loudly, bragging that Rain is doomed because the man behind him is extremely important. He begins to boast even more. But his father suddenly yells at him, ordering him to shut up and kneel. Versilo freezes in confusion, asking his father what on earth is happening. Adrian begins pleading with Rain, explaining that his son is young and foolish, begging him to show mercy. He promises to hand over everything he has if it means sparing his son's life. This is when it hits Versalot his father told him the previous day that Rain would arrive in town, and even advised him to get closer to him. And Rain also points out that his large number of soldiers should have been assigned from the beginning. Adrian joins his son in begging Rain, pleading for another chance for their family. He even drops to his knees, declaring that he and his entire family are pledging their loyalty to Rain. Rain then tells Adrian to surrender every asset he acquired illegally, as it's the only way Rain can guarantee his safety. Adrian then tells Rain that the city lord Eldrick has reached out to outside forces in an attempt to betray Rain's father. Rain acts as though he's a simple fool. He yells at Adrian for speaking such nonsense even after being promised mercy, and then orders the execution of Adrian and his people for spreading such accusations. Eldrick calmly walks up to Rain, bowing his head. Rain smiles, telling Eldrick he trusts him. However, Rain already used his ability to check Eldrick's stats and discovered that he is extremely greedy. Later, as he sits in his office, Rain realizes that the nobles collectively surrendered around 100,000 gold, a sum equal to nearly 2 years of tax revenue. Lee enters the room and serves Rain his black tea. She asks him what he plans to do about what Adrian said, because if Eldrick is truly plotting rebellion, Rain would obviously be in real danger. Rain gently urges Lee to stay calm, telling her he understands her concern but assures her there is no need to rush anything. Rain states that he already knows Eldrick is preparing to rebel, yet at the same time he can still choose to reveal his own intentions. Rain explains that before he makes any move, he must find out exactly who Eldrick is working with. He emphasizes that he is standing out in the open while his enemies remain perfectly hidden, and if he were to act prematurely, everything could erupt into chaos. Meanwhile, Eldrick is in conversation with Guildmaster Malcolm. Even after hearing everything, Malcolm insists that Eldrick has no real reason to side with Rain, pointing out that even Eldrick's father would show the wizard due respect. Deep inside, Eldrick actually feels relieved that Rain somehow turned the guild against him. Malcolm storms out of the room in anger, saying he needs to confront Rain immediately. Eldrick smirks, convinced that Rain has poked a dangerous hornet's nest by offending the magical guild, which will leave Rain vulnerable within the city. The next morning, Lee enters Rain's chambers to inform him that Malcolm wishes to meet him. Rain is confused at first because he has no idea who Malcolm even is. Malcolm bursts out yelling at Rain, demanding to know why he would dare to insult the Wizards Guild. Rain, genuinely puzzled, asks Malcolm when he supposedly insulted the Wizards Guild. Malcolm accuses Rain of pretending to be clueless, then shows him the recruitment letter Rain had approved. Inside, it is clearly written that the project is not for individuals who are wizards. Rain admits that he did send out the letter for the dam construction, but insists that nowhere in it does he insult the Wizards Guild. Malcolm counters with the claim that banning wizards from the project is nothing short of a provocation. Rain is caught off guard, saying he didn't even know wizards took on physically demanding labor in the first place. Malcolm demands a proper explanation, otherwise he will ensure that no wizard continues working for Rain at all. Rain finds himself impressed by Malcolm's fierce loyalty and his hunger for knowledge. After reviewing Malcolm's stats, Rain concludes that someone must have stirred the man up. Rain tells Malcolm that all of this is a misunderstanding, because he never once intended to disrespect the Wizards Guild. He then explains that he actually has 3 reasons for not hiring wizards for the dam construction. Malcolm replies that in their world, everything is guided by magic. To him, anyone lacking magical affinity should naturally rank below wizards. Rain says that Malcolm isn't wrong about how their society works, but he personally finds it unacceptable. Rain states firmly that he wants people to understand that ordinary civilians are not inferior to wizards. Malcolm warns Rain that he must retract that statement if he doesn't want to become their enemy. Rain refuses to back down and tells Malcolm to watch his tone. Otherwise, Rain will order Lei to slit his throat. Lee proves she isn't joking by placing a knife right against Malcolm's neck. Malcolm is stunned by this and demands to know what Rain thinks he's doing. Rain calmly explains that his threat isn't empty, there is an actual law supporting him. He tells Malcolm that he is welcome to test his patience, and Lee will carry out the execution. Then they can both see which side the court chooses. Realizing Rain is completely serious, Malcolm begins begging desperately for his life. Rain notices that even in this situation, Malcolm's loyalty toward him hasn't fallen at all. He feels pity for Malcolm, realizing the man has simply been manipulated. Rain then instructs Leo to take Malcolm away. At that moment, the system notifies Rain that he has used his investigative ability on 10 different people, automatically completing the novice quest. This means he is now eligible for the host reward. He also receives a new quest, to obtain 5 Heisted individuals. Eldrick meets with Malcolm and asks how the meeting with Rain went. Malcolm says he doesn't want to be stressed any further, because Rain refused to listen to him and even kicked him out of the building. Being the scheming man he is, Eldrick tells Malcolm he has an idea that will force Rain to change his mind and even treat Eldrick with more respect. Eldrick claims that once the construction workers refuse to work for Rain will have no choice but to come crawling to him. Malcolm is stunned and asks why the people would refuse to work for Rain, especially when the offer is so generous. Eldrick continues, insisting that Rain will end up disappointed in the peasants if all they do is lie around doing nothing. Malcolm rejects Eldrick's proposal. Eldrick tells him that there is simply no way the citizens will genuinely commit to helping Rain build the dam. Soon after, the citizens notice the dam construction application posted on the board. It promises 3 full meals a day, daily wages paid at the end of each shift, guaranteed on-time payment, and fair treatment for every worker. The citizens are shocked because the offer seems far too good. Many assume it must be another trick, as the corrupt nobles have deceived them countless times before. People begin speaking out against it. That is when Lillian shows up to scold them, telling them not to tarnish Rain's name. Ignoring their grumbling, Lillian informs the attendant that she and her father wish to apply for the dam project. The attendant responds that he can accept her father, but he absolutely cannot accept Lillian. Lillian protests, insisting she is more than strong enough. The attendant explains that Rain specifically ordered that no one under the age of 18 be hired. If they hired her behind his back and Rain found out, they would be punished. He then informs Lillian's father that he may join the construction crew for 8 hours a day, with 3 meals included. His daily pay will be 10 coppers, received at the end of each day. The attendant instructs him to make a handprint on the document and report to the construction site the next morning. Lillian turns to her father and urges him to work hard. The man reassures her that he will, because he has no intention of gambling ever again. The attendant smiles and tells the man that his wife is not required to work. In fact, Rain has ordered that all workers involved in the dam project may temporarily relocate to the workers' quarters. Hearing this lifts the crowd's spirits and they begin rejoicing, thinking that Rain might actually be sincere. Their attitude shifts instantly and many decide that this is their chance to join. Meanwhile, Rain had initially planned to train Lee further, but she can no longer improve because her stats are already near their maximum. Rain realizes that his best option now is to head back into the city and search for promising talents once more. Not long after that thought crosses his mind, Lee comes to inform him that Lillian has arrived and wants to see him. Lillian steps into the room, immediately explaining that things at the construction site are going poorly because the workers have started slacking off. This revelation genuinely surprises Rain. Her father then mentions that he doesn't understand what's happening to his own body, because he's felt unusually tired ever since he woke up that morning. One of them speculates that maybe they're getting worn out too quickly simply because it's been so long since they last did this kind of work. They add that a full day of rest might help them feel better by the next morning. However, Lillian loses her patience with all of them, shouting that they're nothing more than a bunch of lazy workers, insisting that there's no such ridiculous sickness that would make them all tired like this. At that moment, Rain turns his attention toward Lillian's father, Rock, to scan him. As he examines the man, Rain suddenly spots something unusual in the status window. Rock has been cursed. The skill Rain uses allows him to analyze geological states, rocks, layers, formations, minerals, and other landforms within a target area. Rain then commands the system to perform a geological analysis of the entire region. He feels disappointed when he discovers that there's neither petroleum nor metal deposits nearby. Still, he manages to detect something strange hidden underground. Moments later, he unearths a suspicious rock that emits faint magical rays. Even Lee is stunned, as the magic leaking from the stone is so weak she couldn't detect it herself, leaving her wondering how Rain noticed it so easily. Rain orders the workers to dig out the crystal and place it securely inside a box. Afterward, Rain asks Lee what the usual procedure is for people who have been cursed. Lee explains that they typically go to the church, where a priest can cleanse them. Alternatively, a high-level wizard from the Wizards Guild can also lift the curse. Rain's curiosity sparks immediately when he hears mention of the Wizards Guild. He turns to Lillian and instructs her to bring her father along because they need to find a priest. Lillian, worried, asks Rain if it's true that her father has really been cursed. Rain reassures Lillian that she doesn't need to panic, because whoever is responsible for this won't escape the consequences. Shortly afterward, Rain arrives at the church. There he is greeted by a saintess. Since he plans on asking her to help someone, Rain secretly orders the system to investigate her first. The system reveals that her name is Aurea, and to his surprise, she is an elf. Even more shocking is how high her loyalty level is. Aurea then formally introduces herself and asks Rain what he needs from her. Rain tells her that Rock has been cursed and asks if she can do anything about it. Aurea says she will need to examine Rock firsthand. After checking on him, she confirms that Rock is indeed afflicted by a curse. And without wasting any time, Aurea fires a concentrated sphere of divine energy into Rock, completely dispelling the curse. Rock immediately beams with joy, telling Rain he feels like a brand new person, and that he's ready to return to work so he can finish all the tasks he's supposed to complete. Rain gently tells Rock that there's no need to rush back yet, because they still need to sort out the underlying issues first. Aurea explains that the dark crystal they found is the most common type of magical crystal, and someone stored a large amount of magic inside it to produce the curse. However, she clarifies that it's more of a prank than a true curse. Aurea adds that the caster actually had enough power to kill someone with that much magic, yet chose only to inflict fatigue on people instead. Rain then asks Aurea whether creating such a crystal is easy. She replies yes, explaining that those crystals can be made effortlessly and could be hidden at the construction site on a daily basis. Aurea continues, saying that since the project benefits the citizens, there is no way she wouldn't know about it. She adds that hiring so many workers has also reduced the workload on the church. Deep inside, Rain is furious, realizing that Malcolm needs to be taught a harsh lesson. Rain then asks if she has a method to lift the curse from the entire construction site. Aurea answers that it may be difficult because they might not be lucky enough to find the crystal every single day. She also notes that construction would halt completely if all the workers spent their time digging around for crystals. Rain becomes conflicted and starts considering whether he should confront Malcolm directly. Aurea then tells Rain that she knows someone who can help him solve his problem, though the person in question is a bit eccentric. She asks if he's still willing to give it a try. Aurea hands Rain a note with directions to the house of Lady Selena, the former president of the Wizards Guild. Rain knows he must figure out how to persuade this woman to assist him. Suddenly, Lee senses something unusual. She immediately shoves Rain out of harm's way. This shocks Rain completely. Selena is in the middle of working on a dangerous spell, and she refuses to stop no matter what she has to destroy to get her research right. She curtly says she's busy researching magical devices and has no time for any requests Rain might have. Rain asks her whether the magical devices she's referring to are wands. But Selena bursts into laughter, telling Rain to stop spouting nonsense. Lee steps forward, telling Selena to watch her tone when speaking to Rain. Selena's eyes immediately light up with interest, as she can sense Lee's remarkably high affinity for magic. She urges Lee to remain by her side as her apprentice, promising that once she finishes her current task, she will help Rain afterward. The atmosphere instantly erupts with tension between the two of them. Lee steps forward, fully prepared to teach Selena a lesson about proper respect. But Rain manages to steady the situation, gently reminding Lee that they came here to request Selena's help. Selena is impressed that Rain recognizes the items on her desk, yet she still informs him that every one of them is a failed attempt. She explains to Rain that the item she is developing is meant to store the powerful electric magic contained within her own body. Rain immediately asks again, wanting confirmation that she's trying to create a device capable of storing electricity. Selena answers yes, but adds that every prototype has exploded so far. She then tells Rain to leave because she needs full concentration for her research. Rain pauses for a moment before revealing that he actually knows a method to create a device that can safely store electricity. He asks her whether she would be willing to assist them if he tells her how to make it work. Selena thinks Rain is joking with her, reminding him sharply that she has no time for pointless games. Rain reiterates his seriousness, stating firmly that he's not fooling around and that he needs to know whether she will cooperate if he helps her succeed. Selena agrees, promising that if he succeeds, she will help him deal with Malcolm and even ensure that the other wizards obey him. But she warns that if he fails, she will not take responsibility for whatever danger he gets himself into. The three of them then step outside into the yard. Rain looks visibly relieved since he had been worrying about where to obtain electricity. He brings out the blueprint for a lithium iron phosphate battery, planning to use the wizards as his temporary power sources until he can build hydraulic generators. Shortly after, Rain finishes constructing the battery and presents it to Selena. She eyes it with suspicion, fearing that the device will explode even with the slightest touch of her magic. Rain disagrees, explaining that the battery's capacity is roughly 180 Wh per kilogram. He urges her to show him just how much power she can charge it with. Curious, Selena takes the power cord from him, ready to test whether the battery can handle her energy. Selena unleashes her electricity and channels it directly into the battery. To her surprise, the battery does not explode as she fully expected it to. Rain smiles and asks if she's done, pointing out that the electricity she just released isn't even close to the battery's maximum capacity. Selena's pride refuses to yield, and she decides to prove him wrong by releasing even more electricity from her body. But in the end, she collapses from exhaustion while the battery remains completely unharmed. Selena stares in disbelief, shocked that the battery can truly store her magic. Rain examines the device, and he's pleased to discover that Selena alone managed to charge the battery up to 87%. Leading him to conclude that she's essentially a human power generator. Rain then verifies the electric current stored within the battery. This shocks Selena, forcing her to ask whether Rain can also use electricity. Rain replies that not only can he use it, he can also make it so that everyone in the entire city can use it as well. Selena doubts him, convinced that magic isn't something people can learn so easily. Rain smiles again, telling her that he even possesses magical devices far more powerful than the battery she just tested. He assures her that he will improve everyone's lives so long as she chooses to work with him. Meanwhile, Malcolm lounges comfortably in his chambers, waiting for Rain to come crawling to him for help. Suddenly, Selena walks into the room, sending a shock straight through Malcolm's spine. Malcolm scrambles to act innocent, insisting that he would never do such a thing. But Selena orders him to confess what he did at Rain's construction site. She shows him exactly what she's like when she's angry. And Malcolm, terrified of provoking her, quickly agrees to talk. Malcolm admits that he gathered the mages from the association and told them Rain had disrespected them. He then had them create crystals capable of casting curses, using teleportation magic to bury them beneath the construction site, making the workers feel drained, so Rain would think they were lazy and incompetent. He wanted Rain to come apologize to him so they could finally work together. After confessing, Malcolm insists to Selena that this was all he wanted, claiming he had no other motives. Selena scolds him, telling him he was simply being manipulated. Malcolm is stunned to hear this. Selena tells him she already resolved the issue he had with the Mage Association, and Malcolm expresses his gratitude to her for taking care of everything. Selena then asks Rain if he wants her to deal with Eldrick herself, claiming she has enough power to erase him from existence. But Rain tells her there's no need for that. He explains that he actually wants Eldrick alive to help draw out the person Eldrick is secretly working for. Selena accepts his decision, saying she will back off since he clearly already has a plan in motion. With a bright smile, she tells Rain to call her anytime he's ready to begin the project he mentioned. Later, Eldrick reports to the masked man that Rain has taken control of the Mage Association and that he needs guidance. The masked man calmly reassures him, saying that only Selena poses any real threat to them. The masked man instructs Eldrick to focus on sabotaging the troublesome dam project. He reveals that he has already told the nobles in charge of grain distribution to increase prices. He then asks Eldrick whether he is certain those nobles will take his side. Eldrick explains that Renée forced the nobles to hand over their money, but he secretly promised to help them recover it. Eldrick is confident that Rain doesn't have the financial power to sustain the project until completion. Meanwhile, at the market, Lillian finds herself clashing with sellers over their outrageous prices. One seller tells her bluntly that she doesn't have to buy anything and that he doesn't care. He tells her to leave the grain behind if she can't afford it. Lillian remembers her promise to Rain to secure grain at the lowest possible cost. She then asks the sellers whether they aren't afraid that Rain will retaliate. The seller scoffs, claiming they are businessmen and that Rain can't do anything to them. He calls the situation a golden opportunity and insists they're simply taking advantage of it. Then he shoves Lillian to the ground, stepping over her as if she were nothing. When Aurea hears about this incident, she tells her sister Ilaria that the grain they have won't be enough to sustain their people through the winter. She instructs Ilaria to return the grain, saying she will find another solution. Ilaria is shocked, noting that it cost far more than what they usually pay to bribe the guards. Aurea, tired of explaining, tells her sister to just do as she was told. Just as Ilaria is about to tuck the money away, Lee suddenly appears out of nowhere and snatches it from her hands. Both sisters are stunned. Lee tosses the money pouch to Rain, and Rain asks Aurea whether she is willing to strike a deal with him. The Saintess demands to know what kind of business Rain could possibly have with her. Rain gently urges her to calm herself, addressing her as an elf. Aurea tries to act clueless, claiming that elves are forbidden from entering the human capital. Rain calmly tells both Aurea and Ilaria that there's no need to act defensive because he already knows the truth that they are elves. Orya then asks what it is that Rain wants from them. Rain answers that he is referring to food supplies, but Orya believes Rain lacks the capability to offer them any meaningful help. Rain then asks her why she assumes he is powerless in this situation. Orya explains that the city's food is controlled by 4 major noble families, who have ruled for over a century and essentially dictate the grain prices. She adds that while Rain may have frightened a few minor nobles with his aggressive attitude at the banquet, the ones he confronted were insignificant. Rain asks if she truly knows the city well, and she answers yes, saying she has lived there for the past 120 years. The Saintess says Rain's actions against the Edwin family have left no room for negotiation. Orya continues, explaining that war and natural disasters have caused severe food shortages throughout the year. She says her people stand no chance of survival because grain prices have become unbearable. Rain then gives his word to the Saintess, promising that grain in the city will become cheaper than before. Meanwhile, the heads of the 4 most powerful families hold a meeting. They're delighted with the current situation, boasting about the enormous profits they've made in such a short time. They raise their glasses in celebration when their butler enters and informs them that Rain has summoned them to a banquet. All 4 are stunned. One lord turns to Augustus, head of the Klein family, the man who brought them all together, and admits that they're afraid. Augustus tells them not to worry, saying Eldrick already assured him that raising grain prices is perfectly legal under the nation's laws. He adds that as long as they stay united, no one can stop them. Augustus declares that grain prices rise and fall solely based on their mood, and not even the emperor has the right to interfere, much less a young man like Rain. The other lords agree, saying that if they follow Augustus' plan, they'll be wealthy enough to avoid poverty for the next 100 years. Augustus says the worst they might have to do is lower the price by 5 coppers to keep Rain quiet. Then he warns the others that anyone who backs out of their agreement will face severe punishment. The other 3 reassure Augustus that they will stand with him until the very end. With everyone in agreement, Augustus suggests they change clothes before meeting Rain. Augustus and the other lords arrive in the hall, where Rain is already waiting. Rain instructs a maid to tell the kitchen to begin preparing a feast for his honored guests. The lords show up wearing ragged clothing, pretending to be impoverished. Rain is surprised at the sight and quietly smiles, amused that they have no idea who they're trying to fool. The first thing he asks is why they look so filthy when they're the ones controlling the city's grain supply. Augustus cuts in, saying they heard about Rain's dam project and want to contribute. Another one of them jumps in, claiming they donated huge sums of money to support the project and have been selling grain at the lowest price possible. Lee is furious because the 4 are shamelessly trying to deceive Rain. Rain smiles once they finish their lies and tells them he appreciates their efforts in supporting him. He then explains that he invited them to discuss grain-related business. Augustus responds by saying they know Rain is short on funds. However, he adds that selling grain at 2 gold coins per sack is a massive loss for them. Rain shocks them by saying they misunderstood. He isn't asking them to lower their prices. Instead, he wants them to raise the price to 4 gold coins per sack. Augustus is left speechless. Rain repeats himself calmly, and then informs them he will be taking a 30% commission from their profits. Once Augustus confirms Rain is serious, he finally realizes Rain is no naive youth. They even regret not approaching him sooner, thinking he might actually be aligned with their interests. Augustus then asks Rain when he plans to announce the price increase. Rain warns them not to go against him, or he will treat them the same way he handled the Edwin family. One lord suggests informing Eldrick of the sudden change, since raising grain prices so drastically seems suspicious. Augustus insists the matter stay strictly between them so they can fully exploit the crisis. One of them admits the whole deal feels too good to be true, which makes him uneasy. Augustus urges his peers to gather all grain from the smaller merchants before the announcement goes public. They are confident they are about to earn a fortune beyond anything they imagined. The next day, the Saintess barges into Rain's office furious. She demands to know why he is colluding with corrupt merchants. She's on the verge of exploding when Lillian intervenes, telling her to calm down because Rain already promised that prices would drop. Lillian urges Orya to trust him. He must have a plan. Orya then asks Rain directly if he truly intends to raise grain prices. Rain tells her she doesn't need to worry. He says the high prices won't last long because in half a month, the entire grain market will collapse. Orya thinks Rain is speaking nonsense and calls him inexperienced for believing grain prices will fall. Rain then asks her how much she thinks the prices would drop if he had simply threatened the 4 families. The Saintess snaps back that she doesn't care. At least his threats wouldn't have caused grain prices to double. Orya believes people will starve now that prices have reached 4 gold coins. Rain says the effect is the same, only his method takes longer. He clarifies that his goal isn't to make the merchants lower grain prices, but to make them lose everything. 7 days pass. Rain is giving Selena a lecture. When Leo arrives to tell him the elf wishes to see him, Selena assumes it's the usual complaint about grain prices, which have now climbed to 7 gold coins per bag. And as expected, that is exactly why Oria has come. Rain turns to Lee and asks how many days have passed since the price hike began. Lee answers 7. Rain smiles and says it's time to finish the merchants. This only infuriates the Saintess further as she demands to know what Rain means. She insists he explain himself or she will sever all ties with him. In a steady voice, Rain tells Oria he is finally ready to reveal the truth. He explains that the reason he kept quiet was to ensure her anger was real, so the nobles wouldn't grow suspicious. But she can't think of any hidden meaning behind his words. Rain then gives her the simple answer. It all comes down to a merchant who actually sells grain. Rain explains that greed is the easiest human flaw to manipulate. With this, Iceland City effectively becomes the place with the largest stockpile of grain across the entire empire. It becomes obvious that every merchant loses their rationality when faced with a 10,000% profit, because the only thing ringing in their minds is the urge to get rich. Rain reassures the Saintess that after this very day, the 4 noble families in the city will be completely wiped out. The note is meant to inform everyone that Oria is selling the church's reserve grain, because she disapproves of the way the grain market has been handled. Rain adds that the price must be set at exactly 1 coin per bag. Rain smiles, mentioning that he has no grain of his own, so there is no way for him to sell anything. Oria continues insisting her point in the argument, until Selena steps in, calling her a naive soul. She advises her to listen to Rain and start selling the grain because every moment she hesitates only makes her lose more money. Oria fires back, saying her people are not concerned about money because what matters most to them is the grain itself. Rain grows tired of the back and forth and tells Oria to simply follow his instructions, promising her that her grain supply will grow, not shrink. Rain then turns to Selena, telling her that he is relying on her and the Mage Association to seal the entire city. Selena assures Rain that not a single soul will be able to escape. A moment later, Rain notices Lei behaving unusually. Lee replies that she is worried things won't unfold as planned. She asks Rain what will happen if the merchants endure for a few days while Iria sells all her grain. Rain then explains that there are 2 types of schemes, the hidden plot and the open plan. He tells her that a hidden plot can be evaded, but an open plan is nearly impossible to avoid. However, if the merchants catch wind that the grain price will collapse overnight, they will panic and sell. Augustus then makes up his mind and instructs his companions to send some men to the church. Oria urges them not to rush, insisting there is a large supply of grain for everyone to buy. She claims the Pope sent 10,000 bags of grain because he understands how much the people are suffering. But most merchants do not buy into her words, assuming the supply will run out sooner rather than later. Just then, soldiers arrive at the scene. Oria plays along with the situation, silently hoping Rain will be gentle with her, since she will be in huge trouble if the Pope learns about all this. One merchant realizes he actually purchased his grain for 60 silver coins, with an additional 10 silver coins for transportation. After calculating his expenses over the past few days, he concludes that each bag cost him 95 silver coins. Even so, he figures he can still earn a profit if he sells everything immediately. Another merchant becomes furious and decides that if necessary, they will completely destroy the market to survive this. Rain stands on his balcony watching the chaos unfold, and Selena praises his brilliance because everything is happening exactly as he predicted. Selena asks Rain if the price will drop to 50 silver coins at this rate. Rain tells her that once Augustus and his group begin selling their grain, grain will become the cheapest commodity in the entire city. Selena doubts that Augustus and his men will sell like the others since they paid the highest price for their stockpiles. Rain laughs upon hearing this, telling Selena she is overestimating them, because there is no real unity among them. He assures her that when profit is at stake, none of them will be willing to hold back. He adds that the city's grain prices are no longer a concern. Now, they must discuss the second part of their agreement with the Saintess. At Augustus's residence, he learns that the outside merchants are selling their grain at the lowest prices possible. Essentially, grain has now dropped to at least 75 silver coins. After pausing to think carefully, he realizes Rain is likely orchestrating their downfall. The moment the merchants flooded the city with grain, Rain used the church's authority to crash the market price, forcing every merchant to sell in panic. In the end, the out-of-town merchants are forced to sell at a loss just to avoid losing everything. However, Augustus tells them he has another plan that might help them reverse the situation. Augustus explains that the current supply can only sustain the city for a few months. But if they hoard the grain until the people become desperate, they will get another chance to sell at a high price. He assures them they will recover their money as long as they refuse to panic and sell. He warns that the moment one of them breaks, they all fall together. One of them agrees and says Augustus is right. After saying this, he excuses himself to go home and order that all his grain be stored. Deep down, however, he plans to sell everything immediately because he cannot afford to be slower than the rest. This makes the others realize they are each on their own, so they all begin forming their individual plans as well. Rain explains that this is happening because they are selling at the market's peak while buying at the lowest point. According to him, this strategy alone has already regained a massive amount of money. Rain turns to Oria, telling her she didn't believe him when he said the prices would fall. He then tells her she can acquire even more if she buys now. Rain then asks if she is ready to discuss their agreement. Oria becomes puzzled and asks what kind of deal he intends to make with the Elven tribe. Rain says he is prepared to offer anything from something as small as grain to something as significant as land. IA is stunned by his declaration. Oria then prepares a letter and hands it to Ilaria, instructing her to deliver it to the Elven Queen. Rain is satisfied with how everything is playing out because once this crisis ends, the nobles in town will not dare cause trouble for a while. Rain already has control over the Magician Guild, and now he plans to extend his influence to the church as well. For now, the only cards Eldrick holds are the military and taxes, and he realizes that seizing command of the military alone would leave Eldrick exposed, so he needs to figure out a way to slip into their ranks without being detected. Rain is mulling over this when Lee suddenly appears and gently pats his head. She encourages him to take a break. At that moment, a man storms into the room. He starts ranting loudly about how the soldiers have been behaving. The man then yells at Rain, demanding to know who he is. Rain simply replies that he is just someone who wants to discuss business with him. Meanwhile, when Lillian arrives at the city gate, she is immediately blocked by the station soldiers. They search her containers but find nothing suspicious. The unit leader then tells Lillian that she must pay a toll if she wants her goods to pass through. He makes it clear that she either pays up or leaves the area. Lillian prepares to argue further, but the soldier suddenly claims that Rain himself ordered the toll fee to be raised to 5 coins. Lillian can hardly believe that the soldiers are using Rain's name to commit this scam when Rain would never give such an order, and she knows these soldiers will face dire consequences once Rain puts his plan fully into motion. Rain is taken aback when he watches the merchant defend him, because the merchant clearly places all the blame on the soldiers rather than Rain. The merchant confidently explains how Rain used a clever strategy to bring down the grain prices in the city in an attempt to help the common folk. He admits that he personally lost money, but insists it's the first time he has ever seen a leader who truly cares about his people. He even confesses that if he ever gets the chance to meet Rain, he will offer his full loyalty and serve him wholeheartedly. And despite everything, the merchants still support Rain, insisting that the corrupt noble families deserved every downfall they suffered. He says that most people believe the Edwin family built their fortune on casinos, but that rumor is completely untrue. The merchant then subtly tells Rain that the Edwin family's real source of income is human trafficking. Rain is stunned when he hears this. He concludes that the very first thing they must secure is control over the guards, because if internal chaos erupts, it will give outside forces the perfect chance to strike. Meanwhile, the soldier tells Lillian that the toll for entering the city is different from the toll for leaving the border fort. Lillian snaps at the soldier, yelling that he's lying because they only ever paid the toll once before. The soldier then repeats that she either pays or gets lost. The moment the soldier notices people inside the carriage, he orders everyone out so they can be inspected. A chill runs down his spine when he catches sight of Rain's presence in the refined aura he carries, along with his maid beside him. In the end, it turns out that the soldiers don't recognize Rain at all. They only recognize the merchant accompanying him. They call the merchant Trist. Trist has every reason to dislike seeing these soldiers, because he knows they used to be mountain bandits before joining the Edwin family, and he had worked with them to transport humans for the family essentially. The Edwin family is the reason he rose to his current status. The soldier looks irritated, claiming that the last time Trist left the city, he underpaid the tariff and got reprimanded because of it. Without hesitation, he slaps Trist, insisting he must make up for the past mistake or he won't be allowed to leave. Trist argues that he gave the soldier the exact amount he requested at that time, but the soldier insists that there wasn't a shortage of funds back then, though now suddenly there is, and says that he might have let the carriage go. But since Trist is inside the carriage this time, he has to pay 5 gold coins to leave. Rain finally intervenes, saying the toll is far too excessive and questions why the city's tax revenue is so low if they are collecting this much. The soldier is startled that anyone dares address him directly. Then his attention shifts to Lei, and her beauty immediately distracts him. Sensing the situation heading into dangerous territory, Trist quickly tells the soldier that he will pay the 5 gold coins as long as they leave his business associates alone. The soldier wastes no time snatching the money pouch from Trist. Then he turns his gaze to Lei. He asks her where she lives. Lee calls him a disgraceful human being, and in the blink of an eye, Lee cuts him down. Rain then orders Lee to eliminate all the remaining soldiers, and afterward the guards who came with them are to take control of the fort. The soldiers panic and begin running for their lives, but Lee chases after them relentlessly, and she cuts every last one of them down. Rain is relieved that he uncovered this massive issue early, because otherwise he would have walked straight into disaster and ended up losing to the Empire. And just as Lee is about to finish the last one off, the remaining soldiers, a voice suddenly echoes from behind, demanding to know who dares cause trouble at the city's border. The moment Rain spots Caesar, he immediately checks Caesar's stats. He can clearly see that the man is gifted, yet at the same time he is nothing more than a disloyal scoundrel. Caesar admits as much, but he wants to know how Rain is acquainted with his brother. Rain then casually mentions that Priscilla Edgar is his older sister. That is when it finally dawns on Caesar and the rest of the soldiers that the one standing in front of them is Rain, the youngest member of the Grand Duke's household, and the soldiers instantly realize that they are doomed because they have just offended the wrong person. Caesar also recalls that his brother wrote him a letter saying Rain would arrive in the city soon, and that Caesar must ensure Rain's safety. Yet Caesar has been hearing voices telling him that the Duke doesn't value his abilities or care about him, which is why he was assigned to a backwater place like Iceling City. Those whispers keep telling him that he deserves much more. Influenced by those voices, he even orders the soldiers to kill Rain, promising that they will be rewarded for it. Lee is furious when she hears this, and demands to know if Caesar intends to rebel against the Duke. Caesar's own soldiers warn him not to make such a disastrous decision, because it could spell the downfall of their entire family if they misstep. Caesar then insists that the man before them has already committed a crime by falsely claiming to be the Duke's son. He also reminds his soldiers not to forget what Rain did when he wiped out the Edwin family. He claims that since they are stationed in the far western edge of the Caradorial Empire, they have grown rich from the plunder they've accumulated throughout the years, and says they can live a prosperous life if they bring Rain's head to the northern Orvis Empire. Caesar continues, saying the decision is theirs and he won't force them. Lee stays cautious because she can see the soldiers seriously considering their options. After a moment of thought, the soldiers decide that Caesar's reasoning makes sense, and they conclude it is in their best interest to follow his command. Caesar asks Rain if he has any last words since he is about to die. Rain replies that he will give Caesar one final chance to turn back. But when he sees the soldiers are determined to attack, Lee rips off part of her skirt so she can move freely in the upcoming fight. She instantly slits a soldier's throat before he even reacts. Another tries to sneak up behind her, but her swift, acrobatic movements allow her to dodge him effortlessly before finishing him off. Then she suddenly notices a soldier has already reached Rain and is a second away from driving his spear into Rain's head. Without hesitation, she hurls her dagger. The dagger takes the man out instantly, while Rain simply stands there, calmly gathering his aura. Rain then lifts his gaze towards Caesar and says he is offering him one last chance, urging him not to be stubborn. Caesar refuses, commanding his soldiers to charge at Rain and promising 1,000 gold coins to whoever kills him. The soldiers, eager for quick profit, try to target Lee, but she is far beyond their level. She effortlessly takes on several at once, and defeats them all without even changing her stance. The mages among them launch a barrage of ice arrows toward her, but she kicks them away, even though the ice effect ends up freezing her legs. As soon as Caesar notices Lee can't move, he orders his men to go after Rain. Before they get close to Lee, Rain tells her to find a way to leap into the air right then, and he tosses her a hammer to assist. She springs into action. Rain has already armed himself with an electrical battery and is waiting to test exactly how strong it is. He slams it into the bodies of the soldiers rushing him, electrocuting them and inflicting unbearable pain. The soldiers behind them freeze in confusion, unable to understand what is happening, and they assume Rain is annihilating them with thunder magic. Meanwhile, Rain just wishes he had a video recorder so he could show his workers the dangers of mishandling electricity. But one soldier shouts that Rain must be using some sort of forbidden magic, because everyone who approaches him ends up dead. Caesar furiously decapitates the man, declaring that anyone who refuses to follow his orders deserves death. Caesar then commands his soldiers to go after Rain, insisting that he is only one man and stands no chance against all of them. Moments later, a handful of soldiers are still left standing, and Lee asks Rain why those few haven't fallen yet. Rain explains that the battery must have run out of energy, since he only brought one with him for testing. Lee suggests that she should take Rain away from the battlefield, But Rain refuses, saying they cannot allow Caesar to escape. The moment Caesar notices that people are no longer collapsing, he orders his soldiers to rush in and capture Rain. And right then Selena appears, visibly furious. She arrives with several other wizards, asking Rain if her timing is perfect. And he replies yes, because the battery had just run out of power. Selena wants to know what the electrical effect felt like, and Rain tells her he will explain everything after they capture Caesar and his men. Selena accepts the instruction and orders her fellow wizards to subdue the rebels. Without even a moment of hesitation, the wizards unleash lightning upon the soldiers, leaving most of them begging for mercy. Caesar still refuses to surrender, consumed by his obsession with killing Rain. He charges straight toward Rain, determined to cut him down, but Lee blocks his strike, using her dagger. Caesar had not expected Lei to close the distance that quickly. Before he can process what happened, Lee sends him flying with a fierce kick to the mouth. Caesar slams into a wall, and Lee stares down at him, calling him a worthless scum. A moment later, Caesar regains consciousness only to find himself tied to a pole, with Rain and Lee standing in front of him. Rain has obtained multiple documents that incriminate Caesar and his men. Rain can clearly see that Caesar and the border guards have been siphoning money for years. He asks Caesar when he started cooperating with Eldrick. Rain tells him there's no point pretending to be shocked, because he already knows Eldrick planned to betray them, and Rain has simply been waiting for a chance to strike at him. Caesar smirks, saying Rain can't possibly believe that a tiny bit of corruption evidence could do anything to Eldrick. Rain calmly tells him that he is mistaken, because Rain knows those papers pose little threat to Eldrick. What Rain actually wanted were the city's annual business tax figures hidden in the accounts, since they will be crucial for transforming the city later. Caesar bursts into laughter when he hears this, calling Rain a dreamer. He tells him Eldrick practically controls everyone in the city, and no one would ever listen to Rain. But Rain reminds him that dead people are nothing more than corpses. Terror creeps into Caesar's face as he asks Rain if he intends to start a massacre of nobles in the city. Rain tells him the nobles only have two choices: follow the same doomed path Caesar chose and die, or obey Rain and enjoy the benefits in the future. Rain stares into Caesar's eyes and asks which choice he thinks the nobles will make. Later on, Rain realizes that he must repair the city walls as quickly as possible, because Duke Sauron will definitely send troops again. Lee arrives to inform him that they have recovered the money extorted by the border guards, totaling roughly 350,000 gold. Rain then tells Lee that they must reorganize the security forces. He instructs her to have the guards handle the poorest areas, and each should receive 100 gold coins. The remaining gold should be loaded onto a carriage and brought back to the city. Selena smiles, saying such a task is nothing for her. Rain tells her he will explain everything to her on the journey back. When Malcolm comes running toward them with clearly bad news, fear written across his face, he urges Rain to escape because Eldrick has rebelled and seized control of the city. Selena is stunned by the revelation, but Rain isn't surprised at all. He knows Eldrick has finally made his move after no longer being able to endure the situation. Selena asks Rain what their next step should be, since she brought out all the magicians from the guild to suppress the border guards, meaning there is no one left inside the city who can act as their internal support. Because from the moment Eldrick chose to rebel, that was the instant he completely lost control of everything. He stands there surrounded by his mages and the troops backing him up. Rain then calmly asks Eldrick why he decided to betray his own father. Eldrick snaps back, saying he was furious because the Duke abandoned him in a place he considers nothing but garbage. He insists that Rain's father denied him the treatment he deserved after the Duke rose to power rather than placing him on a silver platter. He tossed him aside into a forsaken place like Iceland. Eldrick continues, saying he wrote repeatedly to the Grand Duke, pleading to be transferred somewhere better, but every single one of his letters was rejected. He then angrily points a finger at Rain, telling Rain to blame his father instead of blaming him. Eldrick declares that they are not rebelling, they are simply taking back what they believe should have been theirs from the start. But all Eldrick really offered were dull excuses with no real weight. Rain then states that he will give Eldrick one single chance to leave the city and surrender if he actually wants to survive. Rain warns him not to hold it against him when he storms the city in just 3 days. Eldrick and the nobles burst into crazed laughter, convinced Rain has zero chance of breaking through the city in 3 days. They mock him, saying he is nothing but a man who talks big without ever backing it up. Rain simply asks what the terms of this bet are supposed to be. Eldrick answers that if Rain fails to break into the city within those 3 days, Rain must leave and allow Eldrick to rule it. Rain then asks what happens if he manages to break through. Eldrick responds that if Rain succeeds, he can do whatever he wants with them. Eldrick, clearly excited, asks Rain whether he is brave enough to accept the wager. Selena urges Rain not to listen to Eldrick because they can simply take their time and fight more carefully. Lee adds that she has already informed the Grand Duke about the situation, and all they need to do now is wait for the Duke's massive army to arrive and crush Eldrick and his troublesome group. Rain finally speaks, telling them that Eldrick's group seems eager to make fools of themselves, and he has no problem helping them with that. He declares that he accepts the bet and hopes they keep their word after 3 days. Meanwhile, their allied army is expected to reach the border in about 10 days. After the confrontation with Eldrick ends, Selena appears before Rain, explaining that while the city walls might look severely damaged, breaking through them with just their own strength will still be difficult. Rain reassures his supporters, saying they have nothing to fear because the city wall will fall in 3 days. What truly worries him is the Orvis army moving in their direction. Lee assures him that everything he requested has been fully prepared, and they even found a lake nearby. Rain instructs Selena to order the magicians to use ice magic on the lake and bring the water's temperature down to around 0 degrees. Selena, confused by this plan, asks if what he is preparing will truly be enough to breach the city walls. Rain calmly replies that there is nothing to worry about. The city wall can only withstand their efforts for about 3 days anyway. Later, Rain's men begin moving according to plan, shocking Eldrick, who assumes they must have gone insane already. Eldrick, puzzled, asks one of his men if they have ever seen such a tactic while defending a city. The man replies that he also has no idea what Rain is attempting and guesses Rain may be trying to burn the city. Eldrick is still scolding the man when another soldier runs in and says that the guess might actually be correct, because Rain's forces have just set the wall on fire. Eldrick bursts into laughter, unable to believe Rain is foolish enough to do something so pointless. Eldrick is certain that in 3 days he will have already crushed Rain. Eldrick heads into his quarters to enjoy himself with his companions, but soon another subordinate rushes in to inform him that nothing has changed, they are still only burning the wall. Eldrick ridicules them, asking sarcastically if they plan to use up all the firewood meant for winter. He calls out to his companions, inviting them to come witness Rain's humiliating defeat. His men are thrilled because it is the final day of their bet. Eldrick's forces celebrate, believing Eldrick has already won. They are even more pleased because the heat has become almost unbearable. But Rain tells Eldrick that he has come to offer him and his followers one last chance. He warns them that this is the only opportunity they will ever get before he kills them. Since they chose the path of destruction themselves, Rain tells them not to blame him for what is about to happen next. Selena then summons a massive thunderbolt. She launches the lightning strike with overwhelming force. Eldrick's men laugh loudly, claiming Selena completely missed her target, leaving Eldrick and his group visibly confused. At that exact moment, Rain orders his soldiers to advance toward the wall. Each man carries a jar filled with freezing cold water. After releasing such intense magic, Selena feels dizzy, and Rain thanks her sincerely for her effort. Rain is impressed that Selena has the ability to influence the weather itself, and he believes this power will be valuable for resolving droughts in the future. Selena presses Rain on whether his approach will truly work, and Rain calmly tells her there's nothing for her to stress over, because once the ice-cold water hits that wall, it's guaranteed to fall apart. The soldiers begin dumping the water. A moment later, a sharp creaking noise echoes out. Eldrick looks around in confusion, unsure why the wall is groaning like that. Then he notices the city walls starting to buckle. Before anyone can react, the entire structure collapses in a thunderous crash. Rain immediately commands his troops to storm forward, but he adds that anyone who surrenders is not to be harmed, though this mercy clearly doesn't extend to those who resist. The soldiers follow his orders, rushing straight through the broken wall. Selena is left stunned, unable to believe the barrier actually collapsed, and she can't help but wonder how Rain managed to pull it off. Eldrick finally grasped how badly he misjudged Rain, and panic hits him as he considers fleeing, convinced that his only hope is to hold out until the Orvis Empire arrives to rescue him. But before he can even move a step, he is stopped, told plainly that they won't let him slip away because none of them intend to die today. Rain realizes Selena won't give him any peace until he offers her a proper explanation. So he tells her that what she witnessed was caused by the principle of thermal expansion and contraction, a basic concept in physics. This only makes Selena more intrigued, prompting Rain to explain that thermal expansion and contraction describe how an object swells when exposed to heat and shrinks when chilled. He adds that the principle is tied to how particles, atoms, or molecules shift their motion depending on temperature. As heat rises, particle vibrations widen and the object expands, When the temperature drops, those vibrations lessen, causing the object to contract. Rain assures her she'll hear the rest once they're done with Eldrick. As they move toward the gate, a noble trapped under rubble starts begging for someone to help him. The nobles quickly insist they were deceived by Eldrick and tricked into turning against Rain. Rain reminds them he gave them 2 chances before, but they refuse to take either of them. Desperate, the nobles offer to hand over their estates. But Rain tells them plainly that after killing them, their families and properties would automatically pass into his possession anyway. The nobles attempt to sway him by claiming no one will follow a ruler who executes them, arguing people will call it tyranny. Rain dismisses their argument, telling them they're wrong because loyalty never lies with a person, only with self-interest. He mocks them for living so long yet still failing to understand such a simple truth. One of the men is shaken, asking just how Rain managed to do all of this. Eldrick explains that the city wall had been burned for days, and once the water was poured over it, it collapsed instantly. The masked man becomes furious at hearing this, calling Eldrick's explanation nonsense. He argues nothing like that has ever occurred in any recorded history. Eldrick insists that this is exactly what happened. But the masked man refuses to listen at all, convinced that Rain used some unknown magic to accomplish it. Rain steps into the room, asking them where they imagine they can possibly escape to. Eldrick is startled to see Rain appear so suddenly and demands to know how he reached the room so fast. Rain replies that catching him quickly was easy because Eldrick abandoned the wall and tried to run. Rain adds that the soldiers who were with Eldrick dropped their weapons the moment they saw him fleeing. With no resistance left, Rain simply moved through without trouble. The masked man snarls that Rain won't be so confident in the coming days because the Orvis Empire's army is already on the march. He claims that Rain destroying the city wall has only made his predicament worse. The masked man attempts to act, but Rain commands Lee to stop him. She strikes, leaving a cut beneath his eye. The moment he recognizes Lee, a cold dread washes over his face, and in an instant he vanishes together with Eldrick. Lee apologizes for failing to keep them from escaping, but Rain tells her not to blame herself, saying he suspected they'd planned a way out all along. Still, he is troubled because he has no idea who the masked man truly is. Lee then reveals that she actually knows him. She explains that the man's name is Raven Edwin, once a subordinate of the Grand Duke. Later, he betrayed Rain's father and defected to Duke Soren's faction. Hearing the name, Rain wonders if he has any link to Adrian. Lee confirms it, saying Raven was originally the head of the Edwin family. But he disagreed with the Duke's ideals and willingly left to join the opposing side. Not long after, Selena steps into the room and asks Rain what they're going to do about the Orvis army closing in. Selena insists that even if every mage in the city works together to rebuild the wall, it still won't come close to being enough. Rain responds by telling her she doesn't need to stress over it, because he always manages to find a way through every obstacle. Once things settle down, Rain decides it's time to address the citizens. Selena wonders what Rain could possibly say to keep the crowd from spiraling into fear. Rain lifts a megaphone to gather everyone's attention. He announces that the Orvis Empire's army is now marching toward them. He adds that the enemy forces will reach the city within a couple of days. As soon as the people hear this, dread seeps into their very bones. Selena even snaps at Rain, saying he absolutely shouldn't have revealed such news. Rain calmly asks why he shouldn't have told them. Selena explains that ordinary citizens instinctively depend on the army to protect them, and because they have never undergone military training, keeping calm in a crisis like this is nearly impossible for them. Rain tells Selena that she's missing the main point of the situation. He clarifies that the only person required to maintain absolute composure is the commander. The soldiers, ironically, are the ones least expected to remain perfectly calm. Selena is baffled by Rain's reasoning. Rain then reads the letter aloud, declaring that the Empire believes the citizens are useless fools who can't defend their homes. He adds that the Empire already considers them cowards who will abandon their leader and flee. Hearing this sends the people into outrage, furious after suffering endlessly under the Empire's oppression. Rain continues, saying the Empire made a fatal mistake by labeling them cowards and fools. The crowd shouts back at Rain, declaring they will fight. Rain is impressed by their determination and promises that he will lead them to push the Orvis Empire out of their land. Lee later arrives in Rain's chambers, urging him to drink tea and rest for a moment. Rain tells her there's no time for rest. They must find a solution before the enemy reaches their gates. If they fail, the Orvis Empire will take the entire city. Lee still believes it isn't enough and begs Rain to escape with her so he won't be put in danger. Rain reassures her that he already instructed Malcolm and Selena to evacuate the children, the elderly, and the women in an orderly manner. Rain's attention is drawn to a specific book. Lee isn't entirely sure what it is, but she has heard it's something flammable materials often used in witches' rituals. She explains that petroleum can appear in deep red, golden, dark green, black, brown, or even transparent shades. Its color is determined by how much gum and asphaltene it contains. The higher the content, the darker the shade. Rain orders the soldiers to locate petroleum with the dark green color divine oil. He opens the barrel and, with a smile, he realizes the city might finally have a real chance. Castile is furious that they couldn't hold the city for even 3 days. Eldrick argues that Rain used a forbidden method to bring down the walls, which is why they failed. Castile becomes curious upon hearing the words forbidden method, and assumes Eldarion must have sent a mage to protect his youngest son. Castile then tells Raven he doesn't need reminders about his responsibilities, insisting he isn't incompetent. He dismisses him, saying he has no further tasks for him and that Raven should return to the Orvis Empire and wait for the next developments. Raven is stunned and protests, reminding Castile that they planned everything together. He asks what Castile means by sending him back. Castile makes it unmistakably clear he's being expelled. When Raven opens the document handed to him, he discovers it is his own arrest warrant. Before he can react, Castile turns toward Eldrick. He asks Eldrick what fate he believes he deserves. Eldrick collapses to his knees, pleading for mercy. He claims he knows a secret that could help push the Orvis Empire's power even further. Rain's older sister Priscilla receives a letter from him, but it was actually written by Lee. Priscilla initially smiles, delighted to receive a letter from her brother. But once she reads it, anger explodes in her expression, and she orders her maid Gwen to summon Vilas Caesar's brother immediately. Priscilla wastes no breath accusing him of plotting a rebellion. Vilas insists it's a lie, saying he would never commit such an act. Priscilla throws the letter at him, demanding that he read it himself. In the letter, Lee had informed Priscilla that Vilas' brother is an outright rebel. After finishing the letter, Priscilla asks him if he has anything to say for himself. Terrified, Vilas tells Priscilla that whatever Caesar did has nothing to do with the Hulker family, because he acted entirely on his own. He explains that he even sent Caesar a letter beforehand, urging him to follow Rain's instructions without fail. Vilas pleads with Priscilla to allow his family one opportunity to prove their loyalty. Priscilla asks what kind of opportunity he thinks he's entitled to. Vilas replies that he intends to have his daughter, Rosalind, lead their troops to assist Rain against Castile's forces. Priscilla is taken aback, reminding him that Rosalind has only just reached adulthood, and if anything were to happen to her, the Hulker family would be left without an heir. Vilas says their family should have gone extinct long ago if not for Priscilla's protection, and he earnestly begs her to grant him this chance to prove their devotion. Priscilla then orders Gwen to send someone to keep watch over Rosalind. Castile and his army reach the outskirts of Iceland City, with Eldrick accompanying them. To their surprise, the wall has already been rebuilt, and Eldrick concludes Rain must have used magic to repair it. He also notices Rain appears to be constructing a moat. Eldrick grows worried that the wall has been restored and asks Castile why he seems pleased. Castile explains that a wall is only effective when the surrounding terrain favors defense over offense. He points out a nearby plain, with just a river running through it, something far too insignificant to hinder an army. Eldrick is stunned by this insight, and immediately starts praising Castile as the wisest man alive. Castile turns to him with disgust, demanding to know if Eldrick believes he's incapable of conquering the fortress. Eldrick drops to his knees, insisting Castile misunderstood him. He explains he only wanted to suggest methods to reduce casualties since they're initiating a siege. Castile dismisses his concerns, saying death is a natural part of war. Besides, most of their troops are fresh recruits, so this siege is a perfect chance to test their capabilities. Lee enters to inform Rain that Castile and his mage are requesting his presence outside the city. Castile states he's offering Rain a chance to surrender, all while Eldrick busies himself listing demands. Lee confirms aloud that Castile is indeed the Duke. Castile is enraged at hearing this, unable to believe he's been insulted. He says even Rain's father treated him with respect whenever they met. Rain ignores the theatrics and asks Castile directly what he wants. Castile shouts that he is here to give Rain one final opportunity to surrender, or he will drown the city in blood. Rain calmly replies that he too is offering Castile a chance. He advises Castile to return home while he still has a life to protect. Castile mocks Rain in return. He boasts that he commands nearly 100,000 soldiers. With that force ready to march on the city, he urges Rain to surrender if he values his life. Seeing Castile won't stop spewing threats, Rain tells Lee to give him a lesson. Lee obeys instantly. Castile's mage desperately conjures a barrier to block the attack, but the knife slices straight through the barrier and grazes the mage's cheek, narrowly missing his eye. Rain warns that the throw was merely a reminder. Lee won't miss if there's a second time. Humiliated beyond belief, Castile storms back to his camp. He returns seething with anger and orders his general to prepare the troops for an immediate assault on the city. He refuses to accept being humiliated by Rain and intends to punish him for it. One of Castile's officers reminds him they've marched non-stop for 3 days. He suggests they rest and attack the next day. This only fuels Castile's fury. He snaps that it's impossible for them to be exhausted after merely 3 days of walking. The officer tries to calm him down, noting they still need to construct bridges regardless of their stamina. But Castile refuses to listen. He insists that speed is the most decisive factor in warfare. He then issues orders for the troops to prepare for an immediate assault. The soldiers' morale collapses when the commander arrives ordering them to assemble for the attack. Shocked, they complain that they've been marching non-stop for days and haven't even eaten a proper meal before battle. But the commander tells them to stop whining. Following orders is their duty as soldiers. Moments later, the bastard and Rain's commander asks when exactly they should open fire on the advancing army. Rain asks his troops whether any of them have fought the Empire before. He then asks why their enemy's forces look exhausted and starving. This leaves Rain stunned, unable to believe Castile isn't even feeding his own troops. Those men were basically marched out just to die and wear down the city's defenses. Hearing this sets Rain off, pushing him to demand why Castile would do something so cruel. The soldier explains that only a rare few nobles care for their people the way Rain and his father do. Rage boils in Rain as he realizes just how vile Castile truly is, and he resolves to stop holding back. Rain's men tell him they have more than enough arrows to wipe out the recruits and ask when he wants to begin. But they're taken aback when Rain flatly orders them not to fire. Rain instructs Selena to make every mage unleash cold wind. Selena immediately follows his command. Castile grins, convinced Rain is nothing more than a fool. He brags that he sent rookies on purpose so Rain would waste his arrows, only for Rain to burn through his mage's energy instead. Castile's soldiers laugh, praising him as a mastermind who will take the city with ease. Castile is already fantasizing about dragging Rain off in chains. Meanwhile, the new recruits lift their heads to watch the magic swirl overhead. But once Selena's spell fades, she quietly asks Rain if a basic burst of cold wind is really enough to drive the enemy back. Selena adds that a bit of lightning magic might actually work better. Rain reassures her that she doesn't need to overthink it. Since ancient times, he says, warriors lose their will to fight for 2 reasons: hunger and cold. Rain points out that the Empire's troops are exhausted and too weakened to launch a proper assault. He urges his side to take up their weapons and push forward. The enemy's soldiers beg to retreat, and their captain reports the situation to Castile, yet Castile orders them to keep attacking no matter what. The messenger explains that the front lines are deteriorating because Rain used cold wind to stall the charge, and the troops are starving and freezing, barely able to hold their weapons. He begs Castile to pull the soldiers back temporarily. Castile spits that such men don't deserve to be called noble warriors of the Orvis Empire. The man insists they aren't cowards, just too starved to move, but Castile has him killed for speaking out. Castile then declares he will lead the charge himself. He tells his men that he isn't questioning their loyalty, only proving how brilliant he is. Castile mounts his horse and prepares to charge at the front. He commands his mages to build a bridge across the river. His troops surge toward the city walls. Rain's men notify him that the enemy is charging. Rain then instructs Lai to have the men dump their prepared materials into the moat. He adds that every passage along both sides of the moat must be sealed off. Li confirms the order. The charging soldiers have no idea what kind of trap they're running straight into. Meanwhile, Rosalind is racing toward the city, knowing her family's fate rests entirely on her shoulders. After marching non-stop for 3 days, one of her men suggests they rest or the horses will collapse. Rosalind asks him how long it'll take to reach Iceland at their current pace. He answers that they should arrive within a day. Rosalind concludes that the Orvis forces must have breached the area, trapping Rain inside the city. Suddenly, she halts her horse, shouting for the mage Nox, who's been shadowing her, to step forward so they can plan a counterattack. A stranger then appears out of nowhere. The captain reacts instantly, ordering his men to protect Rosalind. But Rosalind stops them from moving even an inch. Nox tells Rosalind to say whatever she intends to say. Rosalind points at a location on the map where she plans to send her forces to cut off the Empire's army and use the opening to seize the entire Orvis force. She also tells Nox she knows Priscilla sent him to spy on her, but she needs his help. Nox replies that his mission is to ensure Rosalind dies if she steps out of line, and nowhere in his orders is he told to assist her. Rosalind tells him she's fully aware of his orders, but reminds Nox that none of them wants anything to happen to Rain. Nox then asks what exactly she needs from him. Rosalind explains that she intends to lead the army past Iceland and strike directly at the Orvis Empire's rear line. Once she signals, Nox is to release the upstream water and drown the Empire's forces. Meanwhile, in Varshala, the land of the elves, The Elven Queen receives Renee's proposal letter. Her advisors argue that humans are troublesome to deal with because of their sly nature. But the Queen reminds them that their people can't even sustain themselves without outside help. Orya adds that Rain is an exceptionally sharp-minded man. One general is surprised to hear that such a fascinating human exists. Another elf disagrees, pointing out that scouts reported Rain's city is embroiled in yet another war. He tells Orya that they'll only consider accepting the proposal if Rain survives this conflict, which makes Orya want to object. But the Elven Queen explains that the outcome is the same: they need Rain alive if they're to honor any agreement with him. Because of this, she decides she will personally go to the battlefield to see the situation firsthand. Back at the walls, Rain tells Selena they must ensure Castile personally leads the charge. Rain adds that their trick will only work once, and they can't afford to let Castile slip away. Just then, enemy soldiers begin climbing over the wall. Castile starts cheering, convinced they've seized control of it. He orders his troops to hunt down Rain and capture him. The instant Rain sees Castile crossing via the bridge, he commands Selena to execute the plan they've prepared. His men instantly surround him to prevent enemy troops from reaching him. Rain calls out to Selena, telling her to launch a fireball into the moat immediately. Selena responds without hesitation. Castile thinks the spell is aimed at him and orders his mages to raise a barrier. He assumes this is a desperate final attack from Rain's side and urges his troops to endure it. The mages erect a massive shield. One of Castile's men warns that the enemy must be plotting something if they're being forced to waste magic like this. Castile scoffs, insisting Rain is far too foolish to have a backup plan. He claims those fireballs are the last drops of magic Rain's mages can muster. Castile declares that once they block them, victory will be theirs. His soldier cheers wildly, calling Castile the greatest military mastermind ever born. Castile basks in praise, boasting that he is one of the Empire's two great pillars. When suddenly the moat detonates into a blazing inferno. Castile stares in disbelief, unable to comprehend how Rain pulled this off. He's horrified, having never witnessed such forbidden flames before. Realizing he's trapped, Castile panics. He sent all his troops forward, and now they're encircled by fire, destined to burn alive. In that moment, he views Rain as a demon incarnate. After all, Rain just set up a plan to incinerate 100,000 men. While soldiers scream in agony, Castile's commander begs him to order a retreat, and for once, Castile agrees. He commands his magicians to extinguish the flames so they can flee. Selena, meanwhile, is astonished at Rain's brilliance, given he did all of this without using magic. As the enemy continues crying out for help, Rain simply walks off, telling Selena the rest of the battle is in her hands. Selena then orders her mages to push the enemy forces back. When they advance, they find no guards at all, leaving them confused. Suddenly, a massive sword drops from above, narrowly missing Castile and nearly skewering him. Castile tumbles backward in shock, demanding to know the identity of the girl who appeared before him out of thin air. Rosalind pays him no mind and declares that she's been searching for him for quite a while. Castile scrambles backward, trembling as he demands to know what Rosalind wants from him. Rosalind presses him, asking where his primary army is positioned and whether Rain is safe. With no hesitation, Rosalind pulls out a whip. She prepares to thrash Castile mercilessly, and he instantly cracks under the pressure. He spills the news to Rosalind, claiming his main force was incinerated by Rain's forbidden magic. Castile then tries to remind her that he is a Grand Duke, and that she cannot simply strike him in the face. Rosalind roars back, certain that he is feeding her lies with every word. She commands her soldiers to seize Castile and beat him relentlessly until he tells the real truth. Rosalind grows increasingly exasperated. She orders her men to keep pummeling Castile until he finally confesses, then instructs the troops to rest and prepare for an all-out attack the next day so they can rush to Rain's aid. Rosalind begins mentally mapping out various formations to break into the city and draw the enemy out. She demands that whoever is lurking nearby show themselves, insisting they stand no chance. Rosalind is stunned when Iria and a group of elves emerge from the distance. She instantly vents her anger, accusing the elves of orchestrating this mess. But the elves retort that Rain himself was the one who requested an audience with their queen. As always, Rosalind refuses to accept this and insists that the elves are working with the Orvis Empire. The tension spikes just as the Elven Queen steps forward to clarify that Rain was indeed the one who summoned them. She calmly explains that there's no reason for conflict if Rosalind stands as Rain's ally. But if Rosalind sees herself as Rain's enemy, then the elves will withdraw and only return when their own battles are finished. Orya then presents the handwritten letter that Rain sent to them. Rosalind's eyes widen at the sight of the seal, recognizing it as a family emblem impossible to forge. She chooses to place temporary trust in the elves, warning them that this trust lasts only until she meets Rain, and that every step they take will be monitored. The Elven Queen smiles, stating she has no objections. Rosalind then instructs her captain to watch the elves closely to ensure nothing goes wrong. The Queen replies lightly that humans wouldn't be human if they trusted others so easily. Still, she hopes Rain doesn't let her down, for the future of the elves hinges on their agreement. Yet she refuses to waste more time, eager to confirm the truth with her own eyes. As they near the border, Rosalind orders her troops to raise their banner so Rain's forces recognize reinforcements have arrived. Meanwhile, Rain is evaluating the destruction done to the wall. Lee reacts with surprise and admiration. She notices that Rain genuinely grieves for the enemy who died. Lee approaches him, insisting he shouldn't feel sorrow for invaders who deserved their fate. Rain begins to explain the true reason for his sadness. But then he notices the flag they're waving, Priscilla's banner, and the sight shocks him. Rain assures the Queen that if she is willing to invest now, she will be remembered as one of the founders of a legendary city. The Queen tells Rain that his proposal does sound compelling. However, she reminds him that her people have lived in harmony with nature since ancient times, and even without the features he mentioned, they can still thrive. Rain keeps trying to persuade her, but she stands firm, explaining that most human desires hold no value in elven eyes. The Queen remarks that many great empires have fallen because of unchecked ambition. Rain agrees, but points out that desire is also what drives the world to advance. Humans wish to explore the ocean depths, and so they invented submarines. Their longing to reach the cosmos led them to create spacecraft. Rain promises that someday she will stand atop a towering structure, peering down at the world below, and feel a kind of fulfillment she has never experienced. As he explains all this, the Queen grows puzzled, for she has never heard of submarines or airplanes. She tells Rain he is the most self-assured human she has ever encountered, but warns him that elves differ greatly from mankind. She explains that elves have resisted desire for thousands of years and questions whether commercial districts could truly change that. Rain assures her that change is possible if she chooses to invest, promising she will witness an entirely new future. The moment Rain hints at the possibility of a prosperous future, it sparks her curiosity. She wonders if this path might help her avert the disastrous future she once foresaw in a vision. The Queen admits that Rain speaks gracefully and convincingly, but says his reasoning alone isn't sufficient. She also needs time to consult with her tribes. Rain assures the Queen that she may take all the time she needs, though he adds that he will always welcome her investment whenever she is ready. He then invites her to attend the completion ceremony of the Eichling City Dam. He encourages her to come so she can witness the first major step in the city's industrial development. She is taken aback, remembering that the Orvis Empire had marched nearly 100,000 soldiers into battle. She starts believing what she heard directly from the Grand Duke himself, and although these matters interest her, she refuses to become too emotionally invested. Shortly after she arrives in the city, Rosalind bows before Rain, informing him that she was the one sent by his sister. She apologizes for failing to arrive when he needed her most. Rain is stunned that his elder sister actually dispatched someone to assist him. He asks Rosalind why she was approaching from the direction of the Orvis Empire. Rosalind explains that she assumed Rain would have retreated from the border fortress. That is why she decided to take a detour to try cutting off the invading army's escape route. Rain is astonished that Rosalind managed to reach him within 3 days from a place hundreds of kilometers away. He asks how she traveled so quickly without railroads. Rosalind is baffled by the question, unfamiliar with what a railroad even is. Rain brushes it off and praises her for her efforts. Rosalind insists that it was nothing difficult since her Halker family is accustomed to such things. She then adds that her uncle caused some trouble for Rain. Rain is hit with yet another surprise when he discovers that Rosalind is Caesar's niece. She even tells Rain that he may punish her however he wishes, and she will not complain. Rain refuses to comment any further and simply leaves the room. A full day later, Rosalind is still confined to the same room. Her spirits sink deeply, convinced that her family is doomed because of Caesar's actions. When Rain finally enters, he apologizes for making her wait. He immediately notices how tense she is. He urges her to relax, explaining that he is only here to discuss something with her. Rosalind anxiously wonders what he intends to say. That's when Rain suddenly asks her if she is willing to become one of his people. The question leaves her face blazing red. It turns out Rain has already examined her stats. He discovered that her loyalty is a perfect 100%, that she possesses a rare sword mastery trait, and that her attributes include unwavering courage. Rain tells Rosalind that she is exceptionally gifted. Rosalind, flustered, thanks him for the praise. He repeats the question, asking once more if she is ready to belong under his command. Rosalind bows her head and says that if Rain wishes to use her as compensation for his displeasure, she is willing to give him everything. This is when Rain realizes Rosalind has completely misunderstood the situation. She tells him that she is prepared to abandon her dream of becoming a knight if offering her body can make up for the damage her family caused. Rosalind, confused, asks Rain what exactly he means. Rain clarifies that he is inviting her to join his ranks, and he assures her he will not punish her or her family for Caesar's crimes. Seeing that Rosalind still isn't grasping his point, Rain formally asks her if she is willing to serve under him as a knight. Rosalind's heart nearly bursts with joy at the realization, relieved that he was not seeking to make her some plaything. Becoming a knight has always been her dream, and she eagerly accepts the honor. Rain later receives word that the crisis has officially been resolved. He also declares that Rosalind is an exceptional knight. He instructs Lee to send a letter to his sister, along with an invitation to the dam's completion ceremony. Lee confirms the order. He had been searching for at least one remarkable talent, and now he has found Rosalind. Lee then informs him that Castile is being held in the city's dungeon. Rain decides to visit the Grand Duke in his cell. Upon arriving, Rain reminds Castile that he is the one currently imprisoned. Castile snaps back, declaring that forbidden spell magicians from all nations are forbidden from participating in wars between ordinary people. Rain asks if he is referring to Selena. Rain then tells Castile that the only purpose of this visit is to learn who his true mastermind is or what exactly he is plotting. Castile responds furiously that he has no hidden agenda, and that the warriors of the Orvis Empire have no reason to conquer the weaklings who call themselves the Caradorial Empire. Rain laughs at this. He reveals that after reviewing Iceland City's records, he saw that every spring Castile would cross the border to start a conflict, seizing towns and territories yet never occupying them or leaving a garrison behind. By autumn, Castile's forces would always retreat in haste, as if compelled by some obligation. Rain tells Castile that his actions contradict his claims and that he is convinced there is a deeper motive behind their so-called crusade. Castile continues, insisting that they never stayed because there was no point in occupying such desolate lands. He says the Empire's goal is simply to display its might for the world to witness. Yet his tone shifts, and he admits in fear that he truly has no idea what Rain is implying. As Rain walks away from the cell, he becomes certain that a deeper scheme lies behind these annual invasions when he still hasn't been able to unravel. Rain concludes that they must push their industrial progress at the fastest pace possible. In the letter he sends, Rain informs his sister of his intention to take Rosalind in as his subordinate. Priscilla then instructs Gwen to notify Veals that Rain seems to have taken a liking to his daughter, so he no longer needs to be afraid. Priscilla asks Gwen if she knows anything about a dam, since the letter mentions one. She suggests they go to Rain's territory themselves to understand what he is referring to. She also tells Gwen to find girls around Rosalind's age, because she wants to see the kind of women her brother is drawn to. News of Castile's capture soon reaches the Emperor of the Orvis Empire, who immediately calls a meeting to decide their next course of action. But the Emperor erupts in anger at his officials. He shouts that he wants solutions, not excuses. His ministers argue back, saying their vast empire has no reason to worry about a worthless city like Iceland. Craven warns them that things will become far worse if Castile ends up revealing their secret. The Emperor admits that peace talks may be an option, but demands to know if they have someone suitable to lead such negotiations. At that moment, he notices the look on Craven's face. He orders Craven to propose a candidate. Craven suggests sending Duke Richard's daughter for the mission. The Emperor plays along, pretending not to know why Craven chose her, and asks him to explain. Craven replies that he nominated Wilvina for 3 reasons. First, her noble status, which conveys sincerity. And third, and most importantly, Wilvina can use this opportunity to atone for her father's crimes. She would want to prove her worth so the Emperor might grant her pardon. Since Craven comes off as the sharpest mind in the room, the Emperor entrusts the entire matter to him, and he orders Craven to eliminate Wilvina and Castile once the negotiations are over. Rain accepts people's gratitude and waves at them, keeping their morale high. His current mission is to scout for a high-class talent, just as the system instructed. But he keeps running into disappointment after disappointment, since every candidate he checks turns out to be painfully average. Rain has been at this for several days, and he still hasn't found a single person who qualifies as high-class talent. Lee notices how exhausted he looks. She urges him to rest, reminding him that he has been searching non-stop for 3 straight days. He briefly considers teaching chemistry to the magicians, but realizes it would cause absolute chaos. Overwhelmed, Rain drops his head onto Lee's stomach, complaining that even the system is giving him stressful assignments. Rain grumbles that his life just keeps getting more difficult. That's when someone nearby mutters the name Armando. The word instantly grabs Rain's attention, and he turns to look at the man. Rain scans him, and to his shock, Armando's stats are fully stacked. A wide grin spreads across Rain's face. He has finally found a genuine talent, the very thing he has been desperately searching for. Armando is busy trying to convince a vendor that his potion is the best purchase he can possibly make. The vendor snaps back, saying that after getting tricked into buying insect repellent last time, he lost an entire box of apples. Armando insists that the previous incident was an accident, claiming the repellent simply wasn't meant for soft fruits like apples. Lee notices that Rain seems to have taken interest in the alchemist. Armando drops to his knees, scrambling for a way to handle the situation. Rain steps forward and tells him that he is interested in the potion. Armando breaks into a smile, convinced he has finally found a fat sheep he can milk with overpriced potions. Rain asks who he is and why he has never seen him around the city. Lee quickly whispers in Rain's ear, warning him that alchemists are all liars. Rain tells her not to worry, since they still haven't figured out who is actually fooling whom. Armando claims he has another potion that could even let Rain and Lee enjoy themselves. Armando gets irritated when Rain doubts him, telling him not to underestimate him. But he instantly quiets down when he catches a glimpse of Lee's terrifying expression. Armando reels in disbelief at what he has just heard, demanding to know how Rain could possibly have known such a thing. Rain cuts straight through his pride, telling him there's no point in memorizing the notes of an alchemist who would starve the moment their potions fail to sell. Rain then states that he intends to show Armando what real alchemy looks like, if Armando is willing to swear his loyalty to him. Armando is stunned by this offer, immediately asking just who this man thinks he is. Lee steps into the room, informing Armando that the person standing before him is none other than Rain, the new lord of the city. Rain can see clearly that Armando is far from pleased about dealing with someone of noble status. And although Armando tries to hide it, the bitterness inside him is far too strong to conceal. Lee is about to lash out, but Rain stops her before she can escalate things. Rain calmly tells Armando that he doesn't know what nobles have done to him in the past and frankly, he doesn't care. But he is still willing to give him a choice. Rain assures Armando that he can offer him deep, well-developed knowledge in chemistry and physics knowledge, capable of changing the entire world. Yet Armando only grows more irritated by hearing this. Because in his eyes, every noble he's ever known only cares about their own selfish gain. And that is why he believes he can never get along with any of them. Rain is taken aback when he notices Armando's loyalty dropping from 50 to 32. He realizes that his attempt to persuade him has somehow pushed the man even further into hostility. Armando continues, saying he can't trust a single word that comes from a noble's mouth. At that moment, Armando hears his sister Selena calling out to him. Even Rain is surprised, asking the girl if she knows him. With a bright smile, she says their mother told them they can finally live a good life all because of Rain's efforts. Armando immediately jumps in, accusing Rain of being a black-hearted noble who is exploiting the people of the city. Rain is taken aback and asks Armando how he reached that conclusion. Armando points at Selena, insisting that her shabby clothes are proof she's being oppressed, and that nobles haven't changed at all. Lee's temper flares and she snaps at Armando, declaring that Rain is the most compassionate noble in the entire city. Selena joins in, scolding Armando as well and saying that Rain is a good lord. She explains that he hired workers and even provided shelter so no one would freeze or starve. Armando fires back at her, telling her not to speak about things she doesn't understand. Rain then explains that the reason Selena can't wear better clothing right now is because the light industry hasn't been fully developed yet. He promises that once the light industry grows, everyone in Iceland City will be able to wear beautiful clothes. Armando retorts that he has no clue what Rain means by light industry, but he's certain of one thing: no noble truly cares about their people and all they want is to stuff their own pockets. Armando turns to leave, warning Selena to stay away from nobles like Rain. Selena stomps her foot on the ground in anger, furious at everything he just said. Just as Rain is about to move to chase after him, a piercing headache hits him. His body collapses to the floor, and both Armando and Lee rush toward him in alarm. Rain assures Lee that he's okay. Lee tells him he pushed himself too hard, and that's why he fainted like that. Rain then asks what happened to Armando afterward. Lee explains that Armando actually came back after Rain passed out. Rain is surprised to learn that Armando returned to check on him. Lee adds that Armando even left behind a medicine, claiming it would cure Rain's illness, and left right after placing it there. Rain asks Lee if that medicine is what lowered his fever, but Lee shakes her head, saying she didn't give it to him because it came from an unknown source. Rain notes that the mixture's color and texture look professionally made. He opens the container to smell it, and mentions that he'll find a doctor the next day to evaluate its quality. Lee then asks if Rain truly wants to recruit Armando, given how deeply the man despises nobles. She points out that his hatred runs so deep that it would be better if they could understand the reason behind it. Meanwhile, Armando holds a picture of himself with an older woman. It's clear he treasures both the photo and the person in it. Staring at the picture, Armando speaks softly as though talking directly to the woman. He mentions meeting a noble who could analyze an alchemy formula at a single glance, and adds that Selena seems to like this man as well. But even so, he refuses to let go of his belief that nobles are wicked. The woman in the photo is revealed to be his teacher. Armando vows to complete his teacher's research and to avenge her as well. To understand how everything unfolded, we have to turn back the clock 15 years, to when Liesel Grant, Armando's mentor, was recognized as the greatest alchemist in Iceland City. Liesel was not only a prodigy in alchemy, but also someone driven by ideals. She held firmly to the belief that alchemy existed to serve the common people, not to cater to the powerful. She later took in Armando, an orphan child, and raised him both as her son and as her apprentice. She taught him everything she had mastered, from concocting potions to designing intricate mechanical devices, and guided him in finding the balance between humanity and moral principles. But everything was shattered when a certain man stole all of her research and even accused her of delving into forbidden alchemy. Sometime after that, Liesel died under circumstances that looked suspiciously like a planned accident. After hearing Armando's entire past from Oria, Rain admits it is a story that can move anyone. He then asks where Armando is now. Rain adds that regardless of what life throws at someone, people have no choice but to keep moving forward. Hearing this, Rain brightens and suggests they go find Armando together. Rain then asks Oria if she knows what Liesel had been researching before her death. Oria thinks hard, trying to recall, until she finally blurts out that it sounded like something related to steam. But before she can finish, Rain grabs her out of sheer curiosity. He urges her to explain, but Oria insists the only thing she remembers is that it involved steam, while the details escape her. Rain tells her that if what she's referring to is the same idea forming in his mind, then they may very well be holding the key to transforming the world. Oria is stunned because the last she heard was that the device was nothing more than a toy. Deep inside, Rain is convinced that Liesel had been working on a steam engine, and she may have left behind blueprints and experimental notes. Because steam engines were ancient technology in his previous life, he never studied them deeply. However, as a mechanical engineer, he possesses an almost instinctive grasp of mechanical systems. And once the steam engine is brought to life, it would mark the beginning of an industrial era. Armando tells Rain that he cannot stay at the house, because he has no intention of handing over Liesel's notes. Oria tries to reassure him, insisting they aren't there to steal anything. Rain simply wants to see whether Liesel's notes hold anything that could improve everyone's quality of life. But when Rain steps toward the place where the steam engine is hidden, Armando panics and draws a knife, ordering him to stop. He growls for Rain to back away, saying he refuses to entertain nobles. Lee is about to intervene, but Rain stops her and tells her to leave the matter to him. Rain calmly walks up to Armando and calls him a fool who doesn't even know what a steam engine truly is. Rain points out that by acting like this, Armando is only allowing Liesel's great research to go to waste. Armando snaps back, shouting that Rain has no right to lecture him because he doesn't understand anything about Liesel's work. Seeing how stubborn Armando is, Rain proposes a wager. Rain states that if he manages to make Liesel's device function properly, Armando must work for him without question. And to make it clear, Rain promises that if he fails, he will leave the city forever and never return. Armando hears this and scoffs, convinced Rain is making ridiculous jokes. He points out that Rain can't even identify the various alchemical components, yet now he's boasting that he can make Liesel's device run. Rain refuses to waste more time arguing and simply asks if Armando accepts the bet. Armando agrees but says Rain's offer still isn't enough. Armando declares that if Rain loses, he must bow before Liesel's grave, apologize, and then leave the city permanently. Oria tries to intervene, telling Armando he's going too far, especially since Rain bears no ill will toward him in the first place. But Armando dismisses her, demanding that Rain answer whether he accepts the conditions or not. Rain then assures him he accepts he will personally apologize to Liesel if he fails. Rain is already picturing Armando working under him once he repairs the steam engine. Armando then pulls off the cloth covering the device to reveal what his master left behind. Lee's eyes widen, and she asks Rain whether Liesel's creations are truly as extraordinary as they look. However, Armando admits he has no idea how to make the machine operate because Liesel never documented its assembly process. He adds that all of Liesel's research will be ruined if the device cannot be reassembled correctly. Rain is disappointed to hear this, and firmly tells Armando that there is no machine beyond his ability to fix. Rain is stunned when he learns how the device was assembled, prompting him to ask who put it together. Armando explains that he used magic to assemble it, and that every component was crafted by a master dwarven craftsman hired by Liesel. Armando goes on to say that the device demanded an incredible amount of labor, and it's not something a pampered noble like Rain could ever comprehend. He then asks Lee to hand him one of her daggers since he doesn't have a proper screwdriver. As he examines the device, he admits that Liesel truly was a genius, crafting every component with such elegance. Suddenly, he yells at Armando, demanding to know where the hidden parts of the machine are. Armando freezes in shock because he never expected Rain to realize there were still components concealed inside. Rain presses him again, ordering him to reveal where the missing parts are stored. Armando finally explains that those pieces were forged from an extremely rare dragon crystal ore. Rain clenches his teeth, unable to fathom that someone had the nerve to destroy such crucial components just to elevate themselves. Burning with anger, he demands to know which noble was responsible. Armando hesitates, warning him that the noble in question is someone powerful, and Rain would be wise not to provoke him. This only fuels Rain's fury, because in his mind, no noble is beyond his reach. Rain tells Armando to speak up, eager to see who dares stand in the way of his industrial ambitions. Armando finally reveals that the culprit is Duke Oscar. Oria gasps in disbelief at the name. Rain turns to her and asks if she's familiar with Duke Oscar. Oria explains that Oscar used to be a minor noble in Iceland City, but his accomplishments in the alchemy world earned him the Emperor's respect, which led to the Emperor granting him immense resources. Eventually, he was bestowed the title of Duke and given his own territory. Rain then demands to know where this territory is located. Oria answers that it is in Grandsal, positioned at the upper right side of Iceland City. Rain suddenly recalls that his father once told him there were ongoing tensions between him and Elry. Lee affirms this, saying that Rain's father and Elry hold opposing political stances, causing them to clash repeatedly in the Imperial Council. Rain, hearing all of this, quietly marks Duke Oscar onto his blacklist. He vows to make Oscar pay for melting down the gears. Oria becomes anxious and asks if Rain truly intends to confront Oscar, warning him that the man is dangerous. But Rain dismisses her fears, stating that he doesn't care Oscar ruin something priceless, and he intends to make him answer for it. Armando is stunned that Rain is seriously willing to go up against Oscar. Rain then assures him that he will get the engine running and show Oscar the true worth of the steam engine. He asks Armando if Liesel left any design sketches of the machine's core in her notes. Armando replies that unfortunately, Liesel never recorded the design in her alchemy notebook. However, she did discuss the making of the parts with the dwarven master craftsman. Rain asks whether the dwarf knows about the engine, and Armando confirms he does. Rain pats Armando's shoulder and tells him he'll try to speak with the dwarf himself. Armando doubts Rain will succeed because the dwarf is known for his explosive temper. Sure enough, when they arrive, the dwarf immediately tells them to leave, claiming he has no interest in speaking with them. Oria protests, telling Bram that Rain has done a great deal for the city and it would be disrespectful to treat him this way. Bram fires back, saying he has no clue what special thing Rain has supposedly done. As far as he's concerned, Rain only killed a couple of spoiled noble brats and solved the city's food shortage. Yoria is stunned by Bram's blunt words, but Rain signals her to step aside while he takes over the conversation. Rain tells Bram that everything he said is true. He is supposed to govern his territory well and ensure the people have enough food and clothing. He then plainly states that what he needs is the blueprint for the steam engine gear, and that it would be ideal if Bram could forge it as well. But the moment Bram realizes what Rain wants, he orders him out of the workshop, refusing to give him anything. Bram bitterly explains that those gears were the reason Liesel died. He blames himself for telling Liesel she needed dragon ore for safety advice that ultimately led to her demise. Because of this guilt, Bram swears never to forge such gears again for anyone. Armando speaks up, reminding Bram that he himself claimed a blacksmith's job is to forge iron for the people. Bram refuses to budge, adding that the gears might not even function properly even if they had dragon crystal ore. Bram then frowns and asks Rain what he meant by his earlier remark. Rain bluntly tells him that based on what he's seen, he doubts Bram's forging skill is even necessary because he believes it isn't impossible to craft the required gears from ordinary iron ore. The moment Bram mentions the dragon race, Rain finally pieces together what he's been suspecting all along. Rain then says he can actually build a furnace capable of melting iron ore into molten metal. And if he successfully constructs such a furnace, it would completely overturn the forging level of the entire empire. Bram grumbles that Rain is just some rich kid who knows nothing. Rain then suggests they drop the insults and instead settle the matter. If he can build a furnace that melts iron ore, would Bram be willing to forge the steam parts? Bram ends up having no choice but to accept the deal, telling Rain that he will help him if he can build the furnace he claims. Rain feels relieved that he finally convinced Bram to accept his proposal. He then realizes that the furnace's side wall is missing a secondary oxygen intake, which explains why the fuel's full potential can't be unleashed. Rain grabs a mallet and swai. He brings it crashing against the furnace's side, leaving Oria and Armando stunned. Both of them yell at him, demanding to know what on earth he is doing. Rain calmly tells them that he knows exactly what he's doing. He adds that with this adjustment, the furnace's combustion efficiency will increase at least twofold, and the heat will finally reach the level needed to melt iron ore. Orya, still doubtful, wonders whether such a simple tweak can really push the furnace to the necessary temperature. Rain urges her not to underestimate scientific principles. He instructs Bram to add the fuel and test it, declaring with full certainty that the furnace will now be able to turn iron ore into molten metal. Bram hurries toward his furnace, anxious to inspect whatever damage Rain might have caused. But Rain tells him to calm down, insisting again that the furnace is now capable of melting iron ore without issue. Bram still thinks Rain is spouting nonsense, and asks him if he seriously believes forging is child's play. Bram explains that iron ore is incredibly tough, which is why a normal furnace can never reach the melting point. To him, Rain has ruined everything by punching 2 holes into the structure, and he is certain the temperature will drop even further. Even so, Bram agrees to test it, driven by the need to see what kind of outrageous stunt Rain is planning. He warns Rain, however, that he will beat him up if the furnace fails. Bram loads the iron ore into the furnace, and before he even realizes what's happening, Orya and Armando both find themselves utterly shocked. Rain then calmly asks Bram how the furnace is performing now. Bram cannot believe what he's seeing. He ends up asking if simply opening 2 holes could truly make the furnace powerful enough to melt iron ore. With the furnace now performing exactly as they agreed, Rain asks him whether he can forge the gears for him. Bram answers that he will fulfill the promise and forge the gears again. Rain reassures Bram that there's nothing to worry about, because even if Oscar doesn't come, he'll personally go to Oscar. Rain carries the core over to the steam engine with a broad grin. He can feel it. This marks the beginning of an industrial age. He also realizes that Lee was only acting out of concern for him, and the same goes for Orya. Armando jumps in, telling Rain not to speak ill of his teacher. Rain smiles and tells Armando to focus on himself, because once the steam engine is repaired, Armando will have no choice but to serve under him. Armando smirks back, telling Rain to fix the engine first before making bold claims. Rain then calls on everyone present to watch a miracle unfold. To their collective disbelief, the engine roars to life, releasing steam just like a true working machine. Orya is overwhelmed, amazed that Rain actually made it work. Armando becomes emotional, seeing his master's invention finally awaken. The moment floods him with memories of his teacher. Armando vividly recalls his master saying that bringing such a machine to life would be extraordinary. Rain says Armando is finally letting out emotions he kept buried for years. 3 hours later, Bram decides to visit. Since both Bram and Orya have no idea what the machine truly does, they ask Rain if its only function is to produce smoke. Rain has no choice but to dive into another lengthy explanation. He tells them that the steam engine is far from useless and not just some smoking contraption. He firmly states that this machine is the foundation of an industrial civilization. Bram, confused, asks Rain what he means by that. Rain explains that the steam engine is the core of everything. They can't replace it with anything else. After hearing the explanation, Orya looks up at Rain almost like he's divine, admitting that everything he said is astonishing. Bram concedes that the engine is impressive, but he still wants to know whether it's truly as life-changing as Rain claims. Rain tells them there's no need for excessive discussion. Soon enough, they'll understand the engine's unmatched value. He adds that he's about to introduce them to the industrial world so they can witness its power for themselves. Just then, someone informs Rain that Priscilla has just arrived in the city. Rain brightens immediately, thrilled that his sister arrived just in time to see the dam reach its final stage. Rosalind then tells Rain that his sister brought a special gift. Rain grows even more curious and asks Rosalind whether she knows what the gift is. He secretly hopes it's gold so he won't need to beg for funds again. Rosalind crushes all his financial hopes by revealing that the gift is actually a group of young girls who have just reached adulthood. Rain hears this and nearly convinces himself he must have gone deaf from sheer shock at what he just heard. He then rushes over and bumps straight into his sister. The two acknowledge how much they've missed each other, but before their reunion gets carried away, Rain immediately brings up the matter of the girls. Priscilla casually asks if the girls simply aren't his type. Rain says that this isn't the issue at all. The real problem is the trouble their arrival has caused. Priscilla, however, assumes the townspeople must be out of their minds to behave so disrespectfully toward their lord. Rain leans in closer to his sister, explaining that Lee's expression toward him has completely shifted. He insists Lee is usually gentle around him, yet she now looks like she's carrying a lethal aura. Priscilla smiles at this and tells him that Lee clearly cares about him, which is why she's reacting so strongly to his choices. Rain begs her to stop joking around and demands to know why she brought those girls to him. Noticing how anxious he's becoming, Priscilla chooses to be honest. She says she brought the girls because of his letter. This catches Rain off guard, and he urgently asks what letter she's referring to. Priscilla pulls out the letter he sent, the one where he mentioned Rosalind. Because of this, she thought she was acting in favor of his happiness. She assumed he might want options, so she brought several girls for him to choose from. Rain is floored, unable to believe his sister completely misinterpreted his words. Priscilla laughs, admitting she misunderstood everything, but then encourages him to reconsider Rosalind since she seems like a promising match. Priscilla adds fuel to the fire by asking Lee if she has any objections to Rain marrying a group of ladies. Lee tries to maintain composure, insisting Priscilla must be joking because she is merely a maid and has no right to comment on Rain's choices. Lee adds that Rain will decide for himself how many wives he wants. Rain backs her up, telling her not to take his sister's teasing seriously. Priscilla then instructs Gwen to take the girls away. A little while later, Rain and Priscilla sit down for a meeting in his office, where he tells her that the dam will be finished in a few days. He explains that the dam will not only control water flow but also irrigate surrounding farmlands. He even mentions its potential to evolve into a hydropower project. Priscilla, bewildered by his words, asks if all of this is part of some magic array. Rain clarifies that generating power from the dam involves using it to drive a mechanical device, which will then produce usable energy. Priscilla asks if these ideas are connected to the grand solution he claimed would resolve their food shortage problem. She then says the Rain she remembers favored swordsmanship far more than reading, leaving her confused about what changed him so drastically. With a tense expression, she demands to know what happened to her brother. Rain recalls that he had been injured when he first arrived in this world, and it dawns on him that she must be thinking of some swordsmanship accident. Rain smiles and assures her she's overthinking things. He is still the same brother she knows. He explains that a month ago, when he woke up in pain, all he could do was stay home and read. During that time, he stumbled upon everything he's now talking about. Priscilla asks if the books came from the family library and presses him about what the book looked like. Rain immediately pulls out one of Liesel's notes and shows it to her, saying the book resembled this. Priscilla admits that the note indeed contains strange and unfamiliar knowledge. She finally relaxes and praises her brother for being exceptional. Rain smiles, saying that even if he can't practice martial arts, he can still gain strength through learning. Priscilla urges him not to push himself in swordsmanship, acknowledging how hard he's already trying. She then hugs Rain, assuring him she will stop doubting him. Rain feels relieved, and Priscilla promises she will always stay by his side. She also tells him to inform her anytime the territory needs something, and she will definitely step in to help. Rain then tells his sister there is indeed a specific matter he needs assistance with. Surprised that he requires help so soon, Priscilla asks what it is. Rain says he needs her help in investing in him personally, explaining that it's crucial for the city's future development. She's caught off guard especially because he had just seized plenty of resources from the corrupt nobles. Rain clarifies that she's misunderstanding. This isn't about money but about manpower. Priscilla is stunned to realize he's asking her for people. Rain asks whether she can transfer skilled craftsmen, experienced farmers, and some administrators from her territory to his. He promises she won't be giving them away for free. He'll take good care of them and ensure they learn advanced technology. Priscilla acknowledges that Rain's plan is solid, but she reminds him that these people are pillars of her own territory. She asks if he really expects her to let them go so easily. Rain gently reminds her that she promised to fully support him, and assures her that once his city flourishes, she will share in the rewards. Priscilla finally agrees to send some people, but insists Rain must show her results first. She wants proof that her people won't waste their efforts and time coming to his city. Rain stands firm and confidently promises to show her the true power of industry. She admits she had feared her brother had become the Emperor's puppet, but now she sees that isn't the case at all. Gwen agrees that Rain is naturally sharp-minded and incredibly hardworking as well. She's certain he will transform the city into something far greater in the future. She also reveals that it was actually the Emperor who poisoned Rain, making it impossible for him to practice martial arts, something that fuels Priscilla's determination to retaliate. Gwen calmly assures her that handling this matter won't be difficult. But inside, Priscilla is seething. The Emperor harmed the person she treasures most, and she has no intention of letting that go unpunished. Somewhere else, another thug grumbles that they're the ones taking all the risks, while Eldrick is the one pocketing most of the profits. Their boss reminds them that the only reason they can operate so freely is because of Eldrick's support. At that moment, their scout returns with urgent news. He informs the group that the city's mayor has changed. Eldrick is no longer in charge. He adds that when he reached the city gates, not a single soldier stationed there was someone he recognized. One of the men responds that they no longer have anywhere to return to anyway. The terrified girls beg desperately to be released, but the scumbags are already indulging in the vile fantasies running through their minds. They lunge toward the girls, But before they can carry out their disgusting intentions, they whirl around to find Rosalind glaring at them with murderous intent. She looks ready to rip them apart on the spot. Rosalind demands to know what they think they're doing, and the men smugly reply that it's obvious they're just having fun. Their response only infuriates her even more. She slams her weapon down on one of them. His skull splits open instantly. The others panic at the sight of their companion dying, but Rosalind gives them no chance to regroup, driving her spear straight through the fat, ugly thug. Only then do the remaining bandits realize the nightmare they've walked into. Their leader yells at Rosalind, ordering her to stop attacking his men. He demands to know why she's fighting them when they haven't wronged her directly. The moment he mentions Oscar's name, something clicks in Rosalind's memory. She has definitely heard that name before. She asks Rain why she's supposed to keep an eye out for this Oscar, and Rain plainly answers that she is free to cause trouble for anyone linked to him. The bandit leader tries to bribe Rosalind with gold, but since Rain has given her full authority to deal with anyone from Oscar's land, Rosalind snaps at the bandit leader, telling him he was a fool to bring trouble into Rain's territory. She orders the bandits to kneel and beg, promising she might show mercy if they do. But the leader, overflowing with arrogance, dares to call Rosalind a crude slur. She gives them one final warning: submit now, or face the consequences. It only takes a single spinning motion of her spear to send him crashing down. She finishes by kicking him in the chest, launching him across the ground. Rosalind warns the remaining bandits to kneel if they don't want to meet their maker yet. Just then, Rosalind's troops march toward them from afar. She later informs Rain that she recently captured a caravan from Oscar's territory, and those bandits were carrying a letter personally written by Oscar. This enrages Rain. Everyone keeps interfering with the labor force he's desperately trying to grow. After gathering all the details from Rosalind, Rain heads straight to the dungeon where the bandit leader is being held. Rosalind tells the man he must be incredibly bold to conduct such business in Rain's lands. The man brazenly tells Rain that they sell many women to the Orvis Empire every year, and what Rain witnessed earlier was only a fraction of their operation. That immediately captures Rain's attention. He asks if they have more women hidden away and demands to know where they're being kept. Rain steps closer, looking him dead in the eyes, stating plainly that his life now belongs to him, and if he keeps resisting, Rain might as well send him to an early grave. The leader, showing no remorse, declares that Rain has nothing to fear since Oscar is backing him. Rain reminds him coldly that he is standing in his territory, and Oscar's protection means absolutely nothing here. Realizing the man won't learn anything unless he proves he's truly serious, Rain tells Lee to go ahead and teach him a proper lesson. Lee happily pulls out one of her daggers and drives it straight into the man's shoulder, forcing a scream of agonizing pain out of him. The bandit chief collapses to the ground and immediately starts begging, insisting to Rain that he's finally ready to speak. Rain warns him that he sincerely hopes he isn't lying, because if he is, the ending will be nothing short of miserable. Deep down, the bandit chief knows he's leading Rain and his men straight into a trap, since Oscar's assassination squad is waiting inside the cabin. The place looks like any ordinary occupied cabin. Rain then instructs Rosalind to set up an ambush to keep anyone from slipping away. Rosalind smashes the door open, and the moment she steps inside, her quick reflexes allow her to slice an incoming arrow out of the air. She immediately shouts, warning Rain to stay alert because they've walked straight into an ambush. Rosalind orders the cavalry to shield Rain, and they quickly form a solid wall of shields around him. Because of their protection, the assassin leader claims he doesn't want to fight and would rather settle things without bloodshed. Rosalind, already fuming, snaps back that there's nothing worth discussing with scum like him. But Rain tells Rosalind to take a breath so they can at least hear what the man wants to say. The assassin leader then admits they've been supplying slaves to Duke Oscar for many years. He even tries to tempt Rain further by saying they can bring him some attractive girls free of charge. Rosalind is furious at the ridiculous, disgusting offer. But before she can react, Rain surprises her by asking how much the man is actually willing to give him. Rain is let down by the answer and asks if the man seriously thinks he looks like a beggar. Rain boldly adds that his sister gives him far more than that every single month as pocket money. Then Rain states his real price. He wants 100,000 gold coins every month. Rain orders Rosalind to turn them into baskets, and Rosalind acknowledges his command. The assassin leader then says they can leave behind 10,000 gold coins as a gesture of good faith. Rain rejects the offer outright, saying it's nowhere near enough. He orders Rosalind to proceed with his. And in a desperate panic, the man tries to interrupt. Rosalind coldly tells him they already have the advantage. She advises the assassin leader to simply accept his death. The man looks around and realizes there's only one possible way out of this situation, and that is by grabbing Rain himself. Lee suddenly appears beside Rain and Pa. prompting Rain to put a hand to his head in exasperation. The assassin leader finally realizes Lee is no ordinary maid. As expected, Lee sends him flying with a single kick. In the chaos, Rain gets caught in the moment, and before he fully understands what's happening, the man's dagger grazes him. The girl cries out his name in fear, but Rain urges everyone not to panic. Believing this is the perfect chance to escape, the assassin leader makes a run for it. Rosalind also tells Lee to bandage Rain's wound, but she suddenly notices Lee has completely vanished, leaving her baffled about where the woman disappeared to. Meanwhile, the fleeing man hopes to reach Duke Oscar so he can deliver the message of what's happened, only to find a girl standing there as if she's been expecting him. He is startled, but relaxes slightly when he senses that Priscilla doesn't seem threatening at first glance. Priscilla calmly introduces herself, sending a chilling surge of fear through his body. He demands to know what the Duke's daughter is doing in this area. Terror grips him as he wonders whether Oscar's atrocities have finally been exposed. Priscilla explains that the group he fought earlier belongs to her brother's forces. The moment he understands that Rain is the Duke's son, he nearly loses control of his own body out of sheer fear. Priscilla casually remarks that the evening has turned out to be quite an unexpected delight. However, she assures the man that she has no intention. She assures him she won't harm him since she's merely observing, yet she makes it clear he has provoked the worst possible person. Standing right behind the assassin is Lee, her entire presence overflowing with lethal intent. He turns and finds Lee glaring at him with raw hostility. Lee tells him that there's no escape for someone who dared to lay a hand on her master. Realizing she isn't bluffing, the man starts desperately begging for mercy. But Lee reveals her magic for the very first time. And before the man can even process what's happening, he bursts apart into tiny pieces, the result of Lee's overwhelming power. Lee doesn't even allow his blood to touch her, forming a magical barrier to keep herself clean. Priscilla tells her she's free to leave. Gwen steps out of the pocket dimension, showing that the family has an entire squad of overwhelmingly strong women disguised as maids. Gwen assures Priscilla that she doesn't need to worry, because Lee would never harm Rain under any circumstances. Priscilla teases Gwen, saying her wording makes her brother sound like some sort of villain, but Gwen quickly clarifies the misunderstanding. Priscilla keeps poking fun, saying maybe she really should marry Rain off, causing Gwen to blush and beg her to stop fooling around. Priscilla then orders Gwen to send someone to Oscar and ask whether he has grown bold simply because he has too much free time. Priscilla adds a warning Oscar must be reminded what will happen if he dares cross their family. Gwen acknowledges the command, but Rain insists she doesn't need to worry since it's nothing more than a small cut. Gwen tells him to stop moving and declares that he's forbidden from leaving the house until he fully heals. Rain gently touches Lee's face, telling her once more that she shouldn't be worried because it's just a small wound. The two share a quiet moment together, when Priscilla suddenly bursts into the room to check on Rain. She rushed over because she heard he was injured. Priscilla immediately asks if his injury will interfere with his future plans, but Rain reassures his sister that it's nothing serious. Just a scratch, barely anything at all. Lee strongly disagrees, saying that if the dagger had been half an inch closer, it could have pierced his heart and killed him. Priscilla sides with Lee, telling Rain he can't take risks with his life like that. Priscilla then demands a full explanation of what took place. Rain explains that Rosalind captured several bandits, and after interrogating them, they discovered another hidden group of slaves in the forest. Rain continues, saying he led his men into the forest, and when negotiations fell apart, the situation escalated into a fight. Because it was dark, he couldn't see the dagger coming, which resulted in the cut on his shoulder. Priscilla is furious when she hears this, especially since slave trading is strictly forbidden in the Edgar family's territory. Lee then reveals that based on their findings, the bandits are working under Oscar. Priscilla can't believe Oscar had the nerve to commit such crimes on their land. Rain adds that Oscar acted so boldly because Eldrick was his inside man, and they've made a fortune through this scheme over the years. Priscilla admits Eldrick has caused countless problems for their family, then asks Rain what he plans to do with the girls. Rain says he intends to speak with the girls tomorrow. Since he's short-staffed, he's considering recruiting any who don't have a place to return to. He plans to teach them basic skills so they can work in the city. Priscilla agrees that Rain's plan is solid, as it will help boost the city's workforce. She praises her brother, saying he grows more thoughtful every day. With nothing else to discuss, Priscilla decides to leave so Rain can rest. Though she admits she's still worried about him, Rain assures her he understands. All of it, Priscilla then tells Lee that she'll entrust Rain to her care. Lee swears her loyalty, promising Priscilla that she will ensure no harm ever reaches Rain again. Still, Priscilla remains upset that her brother was hurt. Ji summons Nox, ordering him to head to the dungeon and interrogate the bandit leader about everything he knows. The next morning, Armando arrives in Rain's office to swear his loyalty. Armando can't believe that the man he once underestimated is now acting casually in front of him like some carefree jester. Rain realizes he has successfully pulled Armando under his command and plans to work him to the bone in his factory. Armando finally tells Rain to stop messing around and be serious for once, then asks if Rain has any orders for him. Rain responds by asking Armando whether he's willing to become his subordinate. Armando answers that he's ready to serve Rain wholeheartedly and remain loyal. With fiery enthusiasm, Rain announces that Armando is now the director of the city's workshop. Armando is genuinely baffled because he's an alchemist and doesn't understand how that connects to running a workshop. But once he examines the blueprints, he realizes their pure brilliance so impressive that he begins to wonder whether Rain might actually surpass his own master. Their discussion is just wrapping up when Rosalind bursts into the room to report an incident. Rain asks what happened and she explains that the bandit leader in the dungeon has been murdered, leaving Rain shocked. Rain and the girls rush to the dungeon, finding the bandit leader's corpse lying cold on the ground. Rain asks Rosalind when she discovered he was dead. She answers that a guard found the body when bringing the bandit water. Selena casts her magic on the strange symbol to decipher it. Rosalind is stunned when she realizes a dark mage is involved. Lee urges Rain to get out immediately, saying dark mages are vile and their lingering magic can even make him sick. Selena backs up Lee's warning and suggests they should leave the dungeon first. She explains that dark mages lurk in hidden corners, keep a low profile, yet are extremely lethal. Their magic can unleash catastrophic events like plagues. Rain is stunned and asks if these mages are actually studying bacteria. Selena says the motive behind the murder is still unclear. If the goal was simply to silence him, then there's no danger. But if the dark mage is targeting Rain, they must start preparing immediately. After leaving the dungeon, Rain heads to the orphanage where the rescued girls are staying. Rain introduces himself, telling them he was the one who saved them, and explains that they have two options. The first option is to tell them where their homes are so they can be safely returned to their families. The second option is for those with nowhere to return. Rain offers them jobs with shelter and meals in the city. Choosing this path makes them his subjects, he says. But the room falls silent, surprising Rain. He has to ask whether none of them remembers where they came from. Arya explains that most of the children were abducted when they were very young and have faced so much deception and fear that they struggle to trust anyone claiming to help. Arya tells Rain it might take time for them to build trust. Rain confidently declares that there's no need to worry, he's the best at teaching children. He asks Lee to fetch plenty of cookies from the kitchen for the kids. When the cookies arrive, Rain tells the children these are the finest treats. He assures a girl that she's free to decline if she doesn't find them sweet. The girl tries the cookie. Soon they're all happily munching away. Rain then announces it's time to play a game of truth or dare. One child asks what kind of game that is. Rain explains it's simple. Each person draws a question card, answers truthfully, or completes a small challenge. Completing either earns them a cookie. One girl introduces herself as Mia and says her home is located east of the city in a small village called Glen. Rain pats her head, telling her she's a brave kid for sharing that. He assures her he'll assign people to take her home safely. Rain then instructs Arya to arrange escorts for the children who know their hometowns. Rain realizes he needs someone to watch over the rest for now. He decides to check whether any of the girls possess exceptional talent, recognizing this as a rare chance to recruit them directly. He surveys them all but is disappointed to find most of them ordinary, until he discovers that Alia has astonishing stats. Rain is stunned because Alia's stats are nearly on par with Lee's. Since the situation involves dangerous forces, Priscilla tells Nox he must ensure Rain's safety at all moments. Priscilla begins realizing that her trip is turning out to be incredibly productive. Elsewhere, Oscar is enjoying himself in his bedroom with him. Oscar is irritated that someone would interrupt him and asks the guard who the visitor is. The guard reports that the guest is Eldritch, claiming to have important matters to discuss. All Oscar has on his mind are the women Eldritch delivered to him the last time, and he instantly assumes Eldritch has shown up with another group for his pleasure. Eldritch instead explains that Rain is now the new lord of the city, describing him as a man far too sure of himself, someone who believes everything is firmly under his command. Oscar then asks whether Rain is planning to make a move against him. Since Oscar has never even heard the word damn before, he turns to Eldritch to ask what that thing actually is. Oscar strongly disagrees with the idea, insisting that they will be walking into their own graves if the Grand Duke ever discovers their involvement. Eldritch argues that the Grand Duke will have nothing to complain about if they can make Rain's death appear to be the result of the dam's collapse. He insists that it will be simple to pull off because no one knows the true nature or purpose of the dam anyway. He adds that once the city falls into Oscar's hands, Oscar will enjoy unlimited access to the kind of beauties he longs for. 3 days later, Rain receives Ilya in his office. He speaks to her, but she stays completely silent. Rain finds himself wondering what sort of torment the child must have suffered for her to withdraw so deeply into herself. Alvin arrives to inform him that the dam has been fully completed. Rain brightens at the news, relieved to finally receive something positive. He reassures the girl that the upcoming celebration will be lively, with plenty of food and drink plus other children her age who will be there to enjoy the occasion. Yet even after all his efforts to coax her, the girl remains wordless, and Rain decides to let her stay in his office. He tells her that the maids will be available to help her with anything she needs, and reminds her that if she changes her mind and wants to join the event, she only has to tell them. Queen Alvin voices her concern regarding whether the dam is truly durable. She tells Rain that elves are essentially defenseless against sudden floods, should anything go horribly wrong. She explains that they installed 3 massive stone slabs at the dam's outlet to absorb the impact of the released water. Rain is glad to hear of these additional protective measures. He then tells his guests that they will be the ones to perform the very first opening of the floodgates. The Elven Queen remains uneasy, pointing out how enormous the volume of water is on the other side. She warns Rain that a single mistake could devastate all the farmlands downstream. Priscilla also voices her worry, asking Rain whether opening such a massive set of gates is truly safe. Priscilla urges her brother not to gamble with the people's lives. Rain once again assures them both that the water level poses no threat. He explains that the dam's structure has undergone countless tests and verifications. He personally oversaw every step to ensure its safety. Rain tells them there is nothing to fear because they are about to witness something extraordinary. The 2 ladies then step forward, preparing to join Rain for the ceremonial dance. Just as they are about to begin, Eldrick suddenly appears above them. He arrives wearing that same infuriating smirk he always carries. He is the very man who once rebelled and was driven out by Rain. Rain asks him what he thinks he's doing here. Eldrick proudly declares that he has joined the Orvis Empire and risen to the rank of noble. Rain smiles faintly, asking if Eldrick has come to surrender because he dislikes how the Empire is treating him. Eldrick sneers back, saying he is here to settle his score and take revenge. Eldrick confidently adds that he did not come alone. He reveals that he has stationed a team of powerful mages upstream, all prepared to unleash a devastating water elemental spell. Once the dam collapses, he claims, the city and everyone in it will be wiped out. The Elven Queen recoils in horror at his words. She snaps at Eldrick, warning that if he dares destroy everything, she will hunt him to the ends of the world. Upstream, the sorcerers unleash a violent surge of water toward the dam. The Elven Queen panics, urging everyone to flee because the situation looks dire. Rain tells her to remain calm, insisting that no matter how much water Eldrick pours out, the dam will stand firm. He reminds the Queen that he has already set up every necessary safeguard to ensure nothing goes wrong. That is why he remains certain that even a terrifying flood will not be enough to break the structure. Eldrick bursts into laughter, mocking him and claiming the dam cannot endure even a single strike. Priscilla urges Rain again, telling him they should escape. But Rain stays where he is, telling both women that the amount of water they are seeing is nowhere near enough to destroy what he built. Rain even goads Eldrick, asking if this is truly the best he can do. The Queen tries once more to get Rain to move, but he insists the moment to panic has not come yet. Suddenly, the raging torrent tears through the 3 stone slabs. The ladies gasp in shock, while the others are panicking. Rain's smile widens, finally seeing everything unfold exactly the way he had planned from the beginning. The rushing water surges toward the farmlands. This sight leaves every onlooker stunned. Eldrick is in disbelief, unable to accept that Rain actually used him for this outcome. Rain calmly tells him that the dam was never created solely to block the water. He explains that its true purpose is to harness the force of the current, so the entire farmland can receive proper nourishment. Rain adds that the stronger the flood, the more thoroughly the fields will be irrigated. Rain then instructs Selena to chase after Eldrick. Selena eagerly complies, summoning a massive bolt of lightning. With the Eldrick situation handled, Rain turns to the ladies to discuss the investment proposal he has in mind. The Elven Queen admits that Rain's dam has opened her perspective. Priscilla then asks him how he expects them to invest in the plan he is presenting. Rain says the dam has resolved the city's relentless flooding problem, and to elevate the city further, they must push toward building economic prosperity. The Elven Queen asks if he intends to build caravans to achieve that goal. Priscilla questions whether he plans to raise toll fees, warning him that such a move would spark resentment among caravan travelers. Rain reveals that instead, he intends to build a community designed to serve passing caravans, so they will spend their money while staying in the city. Rain then leads them to the only road that connects the city to the border fortress. He explains that as long as they establish a service area there, caravans will inevitably stop and spend. Rain describes a service area as an all-in-one facility, showing them the blueprint for it. He explains that the service area includes resting spots, shops, stables, and more. Rien adds that it is specifically engineered to offer services for caravans and travelers passing through. It essentially functions as a commercial hub combining rest, supplies, trade, and communication. The Elven Queen acknowledges that Rain has presented a worthwhile concept. Rain goes on to explain that trade between the city and the border fortress is frequent, and countless caravans pass through daily. He says locals will also be drawn to the service area thanks to its convenient location once it's built. Rain tells them that this setup will stimulate spending and investment, fueling the growth of multiple other industries. When he finishes, the Elven Queen asks what the elves stand to gain, since everything so far seems to benefit humans alone. Rain confidently tells her that the location will become a hub for grain distribution. The Queen's expression brightens at this. Rain explains that this development will directly contribute to greater prosperity for the elven race. After listening through all of his long, meticulous explanations, she tells Rain that if this road can bring endless food and prosperity, then the elves will back him with their full support. Rain is relieved to hear this, and asks how much the Queen is willing to invest initially. The Queen tells Rain she wants to start by testing the waters with 150,000 gold coins. She assures him that if the project proves effective, she is ready to invest more. Rain is stunned by her immediate offer. Only now does he fully grasp what true wealth looks like. He can hardly believe he has secured a major investor who can single-handedly fund everything he needs. Rain assures the Queen that she has nothing to worry about, promising he will personally supervise the construction to maintain the highest standards. Once the meeting ends, Rain rushes to tell Lee that everything went perfectly. Lee responds by saying it all worked because of his insight and determination. Moments later, Selena joins them. Rain nearly faints upon realizing that the two most brilliant people in his court have no idea how to manipulate the accounting records. Rain briefly wonders if he should pour all his funds into construction, but he quickly dismisses the notion, reminding himself he must keep reserves for emergencies. Lee mentions that Priscilla's territory is full of business prodigies who should understand what cooking the books means. Rain rejects the idea, insisting that the task must be handled only by someone he completely trusts. He adds that fewer people knowing about it is better. In desperation, Rain orders that all the merchants in the city be brought before him. And her sole mission is to persuade Rain to release Castile, so she can save her father. Wolvinia arrives in the city and immediately notices a strange crowd forming. She asks one of the townspeople what is going on, and he explains that Rain is holding an accounting examination. The man admits he doesn't fully understand the situation either, but Rain has promised to hire anyone who passes. He also adds that whoever succeeds is entitled to make one wish of Rain. Wolvinia instantly grows curious and motivated, knowing that if she passes the exam, she might gain the chance to have Rain free Castile unconditionally. Everyone then hurries to take their seats for the exam. Rain has tailored the test specifically for the upcoming service area project. He considers it brilliant to present the candidates with problems so difficult they border on unsolvable. Rain is already envisioning what the future of his city will become. Rain feels genuinely pleased, since he had always envisioned a bright future for the city. But that hope shatters in an instant. When he sees that the exam paper in front of him is completely blank, the man didn't write a single thing. The man claims it's because he couldn't understand any of the questions. Rain asks him why he even bothered taking the exam if he had no clue what any of the terms meant. The man tries to defend himself, saying that words like balance sheet, depreciation, and amortization are far too complex for him. Another examiner then brings Rain a paper that initially looks promising. But all the man wrote was a message saying he has an 8-year-old daughter who isn't betrothed yet, and he wants Rain to take her. Rain is so stunned that he feels an urge to toss the man into jail for a full ideological reform session. Rain clutches his head in pure frustration, and she finally decides to take the exam, approaching one of the guards, who immediately asks her identity. She calmly answers that she's just a traveler and requests a test paper. Since everyone except elves is allowed to participate, the guard hands her a paper but warns her that no one has managed to answer more than 2 questions so far. And she nearly loses her mind when she realizes Rain is essentially recruiting someone to help him manipulate the accounts. She concludes that Rain is no better than the corrupt officials in her own homeland. She forces her pride aside because saving her father matters more than her dignity. Rain is already at the edge of his patience. When Wolvinia submits her completed test, Rain reviews it and his mind is completely blown apart. He is compelled to admit that the woman is an absolute genius. He then asks where she comes from. Wolvinia responds that she is from the Orvis Empire, and the guards immediately react, preparing to apprehend her. But Rain stops them and asks Wilvinia why she has traveled to Iceland. Wilvinia answers somewhat cautiously that she came to negotiate. Rain tells her plainly that he is extremely satisfied with her exam answers. He then asks whether she serves as the Orvis Empire's financial advisor, but she denies it, saying she only knows a little about finance. Rain is impressed because her responses were overwhelmingly thorough. He then checks her stats to understand what he's dealing with, and he's stunned to see she possesses a special mathematics attribute. Realizing she's exactly the type of talent he needs, Rain immediately starts thinking about how to keep her close. Rain then asks what the Orvis Empire wants from him, since she claims she came to negotiate. Wilvinia confesses that she came for Castile because the Empire hopes Rain will release him. In exchange, they're willing to pay him a significant amount of gold. Rain shows interest in the deal. She is shocked, instantly suspecting that Rain might be aiming to claim Castile's territory for himself. Wilvinia asks him what conditions he requires for Castile's release. Rain counters by asking whether she is prepared to become his retainer. Wilvinia is stunned by his demand. Rain tells her this is the most reasonable request he can make, explaining that she is far more valuable to him than Castile ever could be. Wilvinia can't believe Rain is seriously offering her a position as his retainer, something she interprets as completely absurd. She asks if he's trying to humiliate her, since she's a noble of the Orvis Empire and cannot possibly bow to a rival nation. Rain assures her he doesn't make jokes about such matters, insisting that someone with her abilities is far too precious to let slip away. Wilvinia becomes deeply conflicted. She can tell Rain isn't joking, yet she fears he might refuse to release Castile if she denies his proposal. Wilvinia then asks if Rain will reject her request should she refuse to become his retainer. Rain smiles and tells her that won't happen. This completely throws Wilvinia off, since she didn't expect Rain to yield so easily. Rain tells her that she solved a huge issue for him today, so there is still room for discussion. He explains that he needs capable individuals like her if he wants to transform the city into a flourishing center of prosperity. Wilvinia lowers her head in sorrow, telling Rain that although his offer is enticing, she cannot accept it. Rain asks why she's resisting, wondering if it's because she's clinging to some outdated notion of imperial pride. Wilvinia admits that her father is currently imprisoned in the Orvis Empire, and she must bring Castile back. She intends to use him as leverage to secure her father's release. Rain finally grasps her situation, realizing that forcing her to comply might ultimately work to his advantage. Wilvinia then reminds him that he promised a wish to anyone who passed the exam, and she hopes he will honor that promise. Rain smiles after hearing her words, and he immediately orders a guard to release Castile from the dungeon, declaring that Wilvinia will be taking him home. Wilvinia feels immense relief and thanks Rain for his kindness. Inside the carriage, Castile seethes with anger, claiming Rain humiliated him, and he vows to take revenge. Wilvinia cannot believe Castile is foolish enough to think about revenge when he already failed so miserably once. But she points out that the issue isn't the carriage, it's the road. Castile still throws a tantrum, insisting he is a Grand Duke and deserves better treatment. He threatens to report Wilvinia to the Emperor once they return. Deep down, Wilvinia is cursing him, fully aware that the Emperor himself will likely punish Castile when they get back. Shortly after, the guards inform Wilvinia that there is a stream ahead and ask whether they should stop to rest. Wilvinia agrees since traveling at night is far too dangerous. As they settle near the stream, Wilvinia can't stop thinking about Rain's proposal. She still struggles to believe he truly wants her as his retainer. Castile's focus suddenly snaps toward her. He grabs her, demanding she keep him company, but she pleads for him to release her. Castile becomes furious when she rejects him. Wilvinia is disgusted and begs him to at least act like a noble. But Castile behaves like a brute, telling her to get lost because it's none of her business. And in that moment, a knife is thrust straight into Castile's chest before he can react. Wilvinia is horrified, her body trembling as cold sweat covers her skin. The escort captain is stunned that someone dared attack a Duke of the Orvis Empire, and he immediately orders his men to stay alert. He intends to eliminate the threat at once, with nothing more than a sharp whistle from the assassin. Wilvinia is stunned when she sees Orvis Empire soldiers emerging from the forest. The escort captain is baffled, realizing the assassin is working together with Orvis troops. The man declares that their deaths will serve as justification for the Empire to invade Iceland City. Wilvinia refuses to accept this, but the assassin insists this is the harsh truth. He orders his men to go after Wilvinia and the escorts. Wilvinia trembles, feeling like a complete failure for becoming entangled in political schemes, which her father had always warned her to avoid. She now understands why he tried to shield her. She simply isn't cut out for political conflict. Just as death seems to be approaching, Rain's voice booms through the tree line. Rain expresses his outrage that the Empire dared trespass into his territory to commit murder. The Orvis soldiers nearly lose control of themselves at the sight of him, especially since they had already scouted the area beforehand. Rain taunts them, saying their methods are crude and predictable. Wilvinia is surprised by his arrival and asks why he came. Rain asks if she is truly naive enough to think the Emperor would allow Castile to return safely. Wilvinia is stunned, asking Rain if he knew this all along. Rain confirms it and tells her she would have died before ever reaching Orvis territory. Wilvinia asks how he knows, and he reveals that the Empire intended to use her death as a reason to start a war, something he surprisingly does not oppose. The soldiers charge toward Rain and his group, and Rain casually tells Rosalind to wipe them out. Rosalind descends onto the battlefield from above, ready to harvest aura and show the enemy exactly how a real warrior fights. A brutal clash breaks out the moment the fighting starts, and she tears through the battlefield, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. The assassin shouts at his men to hold their ground, insisting that Rosalind is just one warrior and they can overwhelm her. Since he's bold enough to talk big, Rosalind shifts her focus straight onto him. She nearly crushes his skull with a powerful spear strike, but he slips away at the last second, managing to block her assault. And one of his soldiers tries to creep up behind her, but Rosalind instantly dismembers him without even breaking her stride. Rosalind turns back to the assassin and launches a devastating kick that sends him stumbling backward, and she warns him to give up unless he wants to die right there. Rosalind slams a hit into his shoulder, dropping the man to his knees. The enemy troops see this and realize Rosalind is completely out of their leg. Watching from the back is Rhine, and even he is blown away by what he's witnessing. He knows Rosalind will be unstoppable once she gets a bulletproof vest and a submachine gun in her hands. Rosalind then orders the enemy soldiers to lower their weapons, surrender, or face death. The soldiers have no other choice and begin dropping their weapons while pleading for mercy. The assassin tries to stir them back into fighting. Rosalind then reports to Rain that every enemy troop has been captured. Rain is pleased to hear this and praises Rosalind for her excellent work. The assassin is brought before Rain, and surprisingly, Rain tells the soldiers to release him. The assassin urges Rain to kill him if he wants, claiming he will never beg for his life. Rain smiles at that and tells him he's not planning on killing him at all. The assassin wonders who Rain is trying to send a message to by sparing him, and Rain states the message is meant for the Emperor of the Orvis Empire. Rain explains that since the Emperor is so eager to find a reason for war, he is more than willing to oblige him. Rain essentially tells the assassin to blame every event on him, but adds that he's simply waiting to show the Empire why crossing him is a terrible idea. Rain then tells Wilvinia to return to the city with him, since the Empire was planning to kill her anyway. Wilvinia then asks Rain whether he isn't afraid that the Empire will launch a full-scale assault on his city. Rain replies that what scares him more is the possibility that the Orvis Empire might not attack. He admits the thing he desires can only be obtained from them. Wilvinia asks him what he means, and Rain smiles before revealing that what he wants is the land of the Orvis Empire itself. Rain then instructs Rosalind to take all the prisoners and convert them into workers. He's delighted to gain new manpower since he was already short-handed, and Wilvinia assumes Rain is about to drag her into the dungeon. However, Rain surprises her. He brings her into the mathematics room instead, trying to figure out the abacus. Rain then tells Selena she no longer needs to exhaust herself because their savior has arrived. Wilvinia is stunned by the pile of financial records Rain is attempting to manage. Rain then tells Wilvinia that the Elven Queen will demand a financial report in 3 days. He wants Wilvinia to prepare the accounts and hide anything he doesn't wish the Queen to see. A few days later, Wilvinia returns, completely drained from lack of sleep, presenting all the records Rain requested. Rain reviews them and commends Wilvinia for her excellent work. Wilvinia is relieved he's satisfied because she, on the other hand, is just struggling to stay alive. Rain reassures her that he has no intention of killing her, especially since he personally brought her back. Rain then asks what reward she wants for helping manipulate the accounts. Wilvinia admits she does want something, though she believes it's beyond Rain's ability. Rain smiles when he hears that and asks if she wants him to rescue her father. She's stunned by his guess, having never spoken a word about it. She even wonders if he can read minds. Rain tells her it's nothing extraordinary. Human emotions are the easiest clues to read. Wilvinia then asks if he truly can save her father. Rain assures her that there is no negotiation in this world he cannot make. Still, she feels rescuing her father is far too big a reward for merely forging some accounts. She asks what else he wants from her then. Rain is pleased that Wilvinia is sharp enough to understand where this is going. And beyond everything else, Rain wants Wilvinia to become his retainer. The shock hits Wilvinia hard, as she assumes Rain must be joking with such a request. Rain calmly tells Wilvinia that he is no jester, and above all, he despises unnecessary trouble. Rain explains that it makes no sense for him to help rescue her father only for her to return to the Empire and potentially stand against him later. He lays it out plainly. If she wants her father saved, she must become one of his subjects. Wilvinia hesitates, torn by the idea of betraying the Orvis Empire. Rain notices her turmoil and tells her that she doesn't need to give him an answer right away. Rain points out that Wilvinia has barely slept for days and is clearly exhausted. He advises her to rest first, and once she has recovered, she can take her time thinking through her decision. Rain is pleased to see the construction progressing steadily, thanks in large part to the extra labor provided by the prisoners. Then he spots a supervisor viciously beating one of those prisoners. The team leader explains that the man lost his entire family years ago when the Orvis Empire invaded their city, and his lingering hatred is driving him to treat the prisoners brutally. The team leader steps forward, intending to confront the man, but Rain stops him, leaving the team leader stunned. Rain reminds him that the Orvis Empire's army never showed mercy to their civilians during the invasion, so there is no reason for them to be soft now. Rain adds that he doesn't care what methods they use, as long as no one dies before the service area is fully completed. The team leader promises Rain that he will watch over everyone and ensure all workers survive to finish the project. Since autumn has arrived, Rain instructs the team leader to extend their working hours by 2 more hours. Later, Rain meets with the Elven Queen to hand over the financial reports. She senses that something feels off, but she can't quite pinpoint what it is. Rain reassures her that great care was taken to ensure every number in the report is accurate. The Elven Queen decides to trust him and says she hopes he won't disappoint her. Rain promises that it won't be long before she witnesses a flourishing commercial hub rise from the land. The Elven Queen then asks about Reinhardt's situation with the Empire, wondering if a war is coming and whether it will affect their collaboration. Rain assures her that there is nothing she needs to worry about. He tells her he has prepared a spectacular surprise for the Orvis Empire, and when the moment arrives, they will all benefit. Meanwhile, the Emperor reveals a blood-stained letter sent by his spy. The letter claims that Rain conspired with Wilvinia to murder Castile and the guards in the forest. This is enough to send everyone in the room into an uproar. The Emperor declares that the Grand Duke has died because of this, then demands to know Craven's response. Craven is certain the Emperor was the one who ordered Castile to find an excuse to send troops, but he has no choice except to play along. Craven drops to his knees and tells the Emperor he is willing to shoulder the blame. The Emperor coldly asks how he intends to take responsibility. Craven cries out that he would like to personally lead the campaign to attack Iceling City. He vows that with Wilvinia and Rain's blood, the Empire will cleanse itself of disgrace. Hearing this, the Emperor smiles and tells Craven he will be given a chance to atone, since he is so eager to do so. The officials cheer in agreement, all supporting the destruction of Iceling City. The Emperor smirks wickedly, calling Rain a mere boy who handed him the perfect excuse to bring war straight to his gates. He is thrilled with the changes sweeping through the city. And if he wins this war, he will finally be able to expand his territory toward the lands he desires most. Not long afterward, Rosalind arrives to inform Rain that the first group of border residents seeking refuge has been fully settled in the service district. She adds that the logistics department is distributing food and clothing. Among them are about 800 men who meet Rain's labor standards, along with roughly 1,400 women. Rain feels relieved hearing this, saying that when the time comes, the city will no longer need to worry about manpower. He instructs Rosalind to provide the new refugees with extra food, since they still have surplus funds from what the elves gave them. Rain also tells Rosalind to post several public notices announcing that the city will be tax-free for 3 years, and that free housing is available. He wants the border towns near Orvis to hear about it, all made possible by the elves' generous funding. He grants her permission to enter. Wilvinia continues venting, insisting that countless lives will be lost once war breaks out. Rain is surprised to see Wilvinia so upset on behalf of ordinary people, and tells her she has a compassionate heart. Wilvinia thinks he is belittling her and shouts at him to stop mocking her. She declares her hatred for war, and Rain replies that he feels the same. Wilvinia is taken aback by his response, but he adds that this is exactly why he must fight. Rain says that until people learn to fear him, war will never end. He states that only overwhelming force, not negotiations, is capable of halting a war. He has already prepared a deadly marsh for his enemies, and he fully intends to watch them sink into it. He tells her she has nothing to fear because she will be seeing her father very soon. Wilvinia is completely stunned by this, and she starts wondering what kind of dark scheme Rain is hiding behind those words. Rain adds that there's no reason to prevent the enemy from marching in fact, he wants them to enter. Rosalind asks what he means by that. She becomes startled and asks whether his plan has anything to do with the oil barrels. Rain confirms it, saying those barrels are the very forbidden spell Castile once mentioned. Rosalind is taken aback and asks Rain if he can really deal damage on the level of a forbidden spell just by using oil. Rain assures her it's possible because once fire touches those barrels, the resulting explosion will be devastating. Rain then tells Rosalind that when the Imperial army arrives, she is not allowed to win outright. Rosalind is bewildered, pointing out that they're about to get a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to strike the Imperial army hard at the border and strengthen their defenses. Rain reveals that his goal isn't to injure the enemy right now, but to inflate their pride. He wants their arrogance to grow so bloated and reckless that they willingly walk into the graves prepared for them. Rosalind asks if he means they should intentionally look weak in order to lure the enemy forward. Rain adds that she must not lose miserably either. Essentially, she can win or lose, as long as she convinces them that the city's defenses are barely holding together. Rosalind finally realizes that Rain wants the Imperial army to chase them straight into the area where the oil drums are buried. Rain tells her he will leave the detailed strategy to her while he goes to check on Armando's progress. Rain promises that after this war, the very rules of warfare will be rewritten. Bram argues that the barrel is too thin for what Rain intends to do. Bram tells Armando that the measurements are all wrong, because the pipe he's holding clearly can't withstand the pressure of gunpowder. They are still arguing when Rain enters the workshop, asking Armando why he's fighting with Bram. Bram tells Rain that although he helped them build a powerful furnace, he doesn't trust the new design Rain sent because he believes in practicality over theory. Rain tells him there's nothing to worry about, the pipe absolutely can explode under pressure. Rain continues, explaining that as long as the design follows the rules he set, there will be no issues. Bram then points out the size of the tube and says he doubts it can produce the kind of power Rain claims. Rain assures him that from 50 meters away, a single shot can pierce the chest of a fully armored cavalryman. The dwarves burst out laughing, convinced Rain is just fooling around with them. Since none of them believe him, Rain instructs them to build just one gun according to the blueprint. Bram, intrigued, wants to see whether Rain's knowledge can actually overturn their long-held beliefs. When Rain inspects the finished result, he is impressed the gun was crafted perfectly. Bram immediately demands a demonstration of its supposedly overwhelming power. Rain suggests they head outside to test it. Armando worries about the danger and offers to fire the gun himself, but Rain tells him it's fine, the design will ensure a stable shot. Rain pulls the trigger. To everyone's horror, the bullet shoots forward with immense force and velocity, ripping straight through the armor. Bram stares at the result in absolute dread, realizing the weapon can pierce even a knight's finest breastplate. Shocked, he wonders where Rain could have obtained such terrifying ideas. He realizes this weapon could reshape the entire landscape of warfare and might even bring an end to the Age of Knights. Rain turns to Bram and asks if he is finally convinced. Bram drops to his knees, declaring that he and the dwarves will serve him loyally. He admits Rain's wisdom surpasses theirs by far and promises that they will become his smiths, forging the strongest weapons for him. Rain glares at them in disgust and orders them to keep quiet, asking whether they think they have the endurance to withstand the gun's power themselves. The dwarves finally realize how outmatched they are, and they quickly kneel to pledge loyalty to him. But Rain tells them they're misunderstanding, he doesn't need loyalty oaths. Bram asks what he means by that. Rain explains that promises are unreliable, benefits are what truly matter in this world. Bram bows deeply, assuring him that the blueprints will never be leaked and that they will never betray him. Rain is satisfied with this, but he tells Bram to save the pledges for another time. What he needs now is mass production of the firearms in preparation for the incoming war. Bram acknowledges the command immediately. Not long after, Craven and the Imperial army reach the outskirts of the city. One of the commanders is surprised that they aren't marching straight in, especially when it's clear the city cannot match their overwhelming strength. The captain of the troops agrees and tells Craven there's no reason for caution right now. Craven can't believe how foolish these men are. He reminds them about Castile, who sent his final message claiming Rain had used a forbidden spell in battle. The commanders scoff, insisting there's no way Rain has anyone capable of forbidden-level magic in that city. They assume Castile lied to cover up the embarrassment of losing to Rain. Craven orders them to stop bickering, then reveals his intention to meet Rain the next day along with a representative from the Mages Guild. The commander is stunned and asks if Craven is trying to negotiate peace. Craven clarifies that he only wants to see Rain to confirm whether he truly has a forbidden-level mage on his side. If that's the case, then they must proceed carefully, since the outcome of any battle would be unpredictable. He also reminds them that they are here to suppress a rebellion, not launch an invasion, and to do that, they must present a legitimate justification. Craven urges them to control themselves or they will regret it. Realizing how serious he is, both commanders promise they'll behave. Rain is impressed when he hears this and admits the Empire does have some people with brains. He tells his guards to allow them entry. Soon after, Craven and the mage accompanying him step into Rain's office for a conversation. Rain asks Craven why he came to see him before the war has even begun. Craven voices his concern about the forbidden spell Rain supposedly used against Castile. The mage with him warns that they expect Rain to cooperate with their investigation or else. Rosalind is furious and snaps at the mage for speaking to Rain so disrespectfully. The mage boldly replies that the Mage Guild's rules are not bound by the stiff etiquette of human nobility. He says he'll only bow to Rain if Rain proves himself to be the smarter one. Rosalind asks how Rain is supposed to prove that. The mage pulls out a tangram puzzle. He declares that if anyone in the room can solve the puzzle, he will immediately bow to Rain. Rain is taken aback when he sees the tangram. He knows it was nothing more than a child's toy in his previous life. He's disappointed that a mage's intelligence is measured using something so juvenile. Selina recognizes the puzzle as well. She explains that it's used in advancement exams for mages, and there are countless possible configurations. However, she adds that in rare cases, the pieces can be arranged perfectly back into the original frame. The test measures a mage's spatial imagination and logical thinking. The Imperial Mage smugly confirms her explanation. He adds that even a high-level mage needs a long time to solve such a puzzle. He then tells Rain that if he manages to solve it, he'll bow instantly. Rain looks thoroughly unimpressed, unable to believe this man spent an entire month solving what amounts to a preschool learning toy. Selina decides to try it herself, since she solved a similar tangram in the high-level mage exam. But despite repeated attempts, she fails to assemble it. She apologizes to Rain for being so useless. The Imperial Mage seizes the moment to belittle her, saying she'll never advance further with such poor understanding. He mocks everyone in the city, calling them all idiots, and insists there's no way a forbidden mage exists here. The guards are enraged and scold him for acting so disgracefully in front of their lord. The mage scoffs, saying he doesn't care. Rain is just another noble to him. He turns to leave, but Rain tells him to stop. Rain says the mage is wrong because there is someone who can solve it. The mage asks who that person is. Rain smiles and says he will solve the puzzle himself. The mage bursts into laughter. He reminds Rain that he was the pampered noble who couldn't even pass the junior magician exam, so there's no chance he could solve this puzzle. Rain replies with a smile, saying he failed that exam simply because the questions were too stupid to bother with. The mage tells him to go ahead and solve it if he really can. Rain suggests making things more interesting by placing a bet. The mage asks what the wager will be. Rain tells him that if he completes the puzzle in 30 seconds, the mage must kneel and apologize to Selina. Selina is stunned that Rain is standing up for her. Rain reminds her that she is his subordinate, and only he has the right to bully her. The mage accepts but says that if Rain fails, then Rain will have to kneel before him and apologize. Rain agrees to the terms and takes the puzzle in hand, just as he said he would. He cracks the puzzle in just 30 seconds, leaving the mage frozen in shock and terror. The mage refuses to accept what he's seeing, because that same puzzle cost him an entire month to figure out. Now that the puzzle has been completed, Rain brings up the wager they agreed on. The man argues that it was pure coincidence, insisting it was just a fortunate moment and not proof of any real talent. Rain answers bluntly that it doesn't matter whether it was chance or brilliance, because the fact remains he's the one who solved it. He tells him that he can either kneel and sincerely apologize to Selina, or let Rosalind separate his head from his body. Rosalind proves she isn't bluffing by slamming her blade into the ground with force. Craven reminds the mage that the bet was made publicly, and backing out now will reflect poorly on him. Craven adds that this would also stain the reputation of the mage's entire guild. He then asks whether the mage intends to stand by his promise, or if he wants to give Craven the excuse to report his shameful conduct to the guild. The mage realizes he has no escape from the situation, and he reluctantly prepares to apologize to Selina. But inside, fury churns, and he silently vows to make Rain suffer the same humiliation he felt. Meanwhile, Craven finally accepts that Rain is nothing like ordinary nobles, and dealing with him will require caution. Since the mage has fulfilled his part of the bet,